So the date is the 27th of October 2025. This is our 53rd halaqah for Tawheed. We are on volume 3 of Kitab At Tawheed, chapter 5, page 36, the Quranic depiction of a deity. Clarifying the Quranic meaning of the word ilah, God, deity, is critically important at this juncture in relation to the meaning or meanings that arose in the minds of the Arabs during the epochs of revelation. A people eloquent and well-versed in the Arabic language, when they heard or pronounced the word ilah, this is the central meaning outlined within the legal texts. For point of reference and to reiterate, the legal texts themselves are the book of Allah, the Quran, together with the authentic prophetic Sunnah. What is the specific meaning? The critical matter has been eloquently outlined by the mercy of Allah, clarified within the text of the Holy Quran in many places. These include the following, where He, blessed be His name, said, قُلْ أَرَيْتُمْ إِنْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ سَمْعَكُمْ وَأَبْصَارَكُمْ وَخَتَمَ عَلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ مَنْ إِلَهٌ غَيْرُ اللَّهِ يَأْتِيكُمْ بِهِ. Say, Prophet, think, if Allah were to take away your hearing and your sight and seal up your hearts, what God other than Allah could restore them? And that's 646. Given this is an ilah, is that entity or being which is capable of bestowing hearing and sight by way of its intrinsic power. That is done so independently, regardless of whether the ilah is worshipped or not, meaning independent of any acts, any of the specific acts which are undertaken by, in brackets, worshippers, in quote marks. Moreover, it exists within the power of ilah, whether they exist, the worshippers, or not. So what God other than Allah could bring you light? Do you not listen? And that's 2871. The ilah, deity, is the entity or being which is capable. So that one was man ilahun ghayrullahi ya'tikum
بضياء
أفلا تسمعون.
Who will bring you light. If Allah takes away day and night, who will be able to return day and night again? So you have light, and which you can work and so on, the daylight, and you have a night which you can rest, and the system can regenerate.
The ilah, deity, is the entity or being which is capable of bringing forth light by way of its own intrinsic power, independently, regardless of whether it is worshipped or not. The following verses continue, stating that the ilah is the entity or being that brings about day and night by way of its own intrinsic power, again independently and regardless of whether it is worshipped or not. Going further, this is regardless of human act, quite apart even from whether humanity exists altogether in the first place. The ilah is a Sayyid, the master, possessing complete sovereignty. He is al-Rabb, the Lord who is obeyed with absolute obedience, in other words, meaning that he retains the exclusive prerogative of command. Threatening Moses, the Pharaoh said, قَالَ لَئِنِ اتَّخَذْتَ إِلَهًا غَيْرِي لَأَجَّلَنَّكَ مِنَ الْمُسْجِنِينَ. If you take any God other than me, I will throw you into prison. That is 2629. This is according to the correct interpretation, but there are, however, other conflicting viewpoints in this respect. From the next two verses, we can discern that the ilah is the entity or being retaining complete and utter invincibility. That entity or being cannot be harmed and grants protection to others in an absolute, unconditional manner. Its protection cannot be violated, nor can its pledge be broken. It intercedes without needing permission, and its intercession is never rejected, whether it is worshipped or not. Again, irrespective of human agency or even existence. So I'll just read the English on this one. This font is too small. Do they have gods who can defend against us? Their gods have no power to help themselves, nor can they be protected from us. Am lakum ilahun تمنعهم. So it was
آلهة تمنعهم من دوننا.
and that is 21:43. And the next verse is اتخذوا من دونه إلها إن يردنا الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتكم شيئا ولا
شيئا
ولا ينقذون.
Be able to read the English if this Arabic is so small.
Yeah. This is, how could I take besides him any other gods whose intercession will not help me and who would not be able to save me if the Lord of mercy wished to harm me? And that's 36-23. Next, the ilah is the entity or being with the ability to bring the dead to life. This covers 2, the matter of resurrecting the dead to preside in judgment over them by way of intrinsic power, independently whether it is worshipped or not, irrespective of human agency or even existence. He, the Exalted, says, have they chosen any gods from the earth who can give life to the dead? That's 21:21. Taking all these points together, there are many occasions within the Holy Quran, within similar texts, where these specific attributes and acts are mentioned. These acts and attributes together provide the qualification to one who possesses them and performs them to be called al-ilah, God, deity. Given that, it is therefore entirely reasonable to conceive of human actions seeking from that ilah forgiveness, pardon, and mercy, or to seek mediation and intercession to call for aid, refuge, and support. It can also include the request for aid, benefits, and protections from harm, or to dedicate rituals and acts of worship to them, or to direct words and actions to them that express heartfelt states and emotional responses, such as sanctification, glorification, reverence, humility, submission and surrender, love, affection, and a sense of closeness and solace, hope, aspiration and desire, trust and reliance, fear, dread, and awe. All of that stems from their being an ilah. In other words, they possess certain attributes. Only then can these be considered as al-ibadah, worship. Without that, such acts cannot be construed as such, as will be covered exhaustively in this present volume. Next section, definitive proofs enumerated. There are several...
Let me just comment on that. Actually, in the next edition, inshallah, we'll make it well precise. You see there, with the first ayahs, 4, 5, and most others, are Allah himself talking in the Quran. Do they have a deity beside us? Do that and so on. So this is Allah expressing what the meaning of deity in Quran in the Arabic language, using the word ilah, giving it the correct meaning. If the Quran is a revelation of Allah, then that must be the correct meaning. 2 ayahs or the words or places, he is quoting other people saying, so he's, but these people were not Arabic speakers, so they said something, God, whatever name they used, whatever linguistic expression they used, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala translated there the meaning intended by them into the word ilah. Notice that is the translation is definitely correct, no doubt about that, because translation by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the expression itself, what the people thought about that, maybe not the correct one, but Allah is reporting what they were thinking. So when Pharaoh said, if you take a ilah other beside me, I will put you in prison. Most likely at that time, ilah and Rabb were confused, as I discussed in the case of Musa, and they were asking Allah which name I should mention to you, etc. And maybe Pharaoh is thinking this way, but it translated probably the best translation, what is ilah in Arabic when the Quran was released. So make a distinction, there's a fine distinction, but that what Allah is himself talking, that's the absolute, that's the major. The other one, maybe the one who's talking something, even if you will, intended, like the man of the Surah Yasin, who said, do you ask me to have a deity beside Allah, which if Allah want to harm me, they cannot protect me? That's his perception of ilah, not Allah's perception. But whatever word he used in his language is best translated as ilah in Arabic. Yeah, you see? So in that case, the man of Yunus is correct. He thinks that they're threatening that Allah will do harm to you if you forsake them and say, are you threatening with entities who, if Allah want to harm me, they cannot save me? And if Allah want benefit me, they cannot take away the harm, meaning they have power, which is competitive to Allah's power. That's it. That's a part of the correct meaning. In the case of Fir'aun, it doesn't seem the correct meaning. What he meant, if you accept as a sovereignty, as a sovereign being, and the one who commands, and his commands have been obeyed, anybody beside me, I will put you in prison. He's talking more about sovereignty and lordship. But it's a fine point. Inshallah, next edition, you see, we are improving by discussion, by interaction. That's the way knowledge should advance, by interaction, by thinking, by analyzing. But in any case, the man of Yasin is referring to an aspect in his mind, which is correct. It's similar to what Allah in his absolute knowledge referred to in the first 4 ayahs. But Fir'aun is most likely confused. At the time, they didn't have very much clear distinction or any clear idea, precision about divinity or eternity or anything like that. Everything is just primitive and simple-minded to be taken at face. Okay, carry on. That's just a remark to make things more precise in our mind.
Section definitive proofs enumerated. There are several passages with the Quran that provide for definitive, conclusive proofs upon this matter, which will suffice. Here, these are enumerated to provide the clear exposition that this subject requires, the first of which is set out in the following verses as they appear in Surah Naml. The words and expression of Allah, the Exalted and Majestic, alone suffice, for indeed He is the most truthful of all speakers. Okay, I'll try and I'll zoom in. I'll put this on my phone and see if I can zoom in. There's a bit of a long verse here. Okay. قل الحمد لله والسلام على عباده الذين استفى الله خير أما يشركون.
Sentence. قل الحمد لله والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. Full stop here. Now the question comes. الله خير مما يشركون.
الله خير أما يشركون أمن خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل لكم من السماء ماء فأنبتنا به حدائق ذات بهجة ما كان لكم أن تنبتوا شجرتها إله مع الله بل هم قوم يعدلون.
We know this from Surah An-Naml.
Okay, I'll just go to this translation then.
Yeah.
The translation: Say, Prophet, praise be to Allah and peace on the servants He has chosen. Who is better, Allah or those they set up as partners with Him, who created the heavens and the earth, who send down water from the sky for you, with which we cause gardens of delight to grow. You have no power to make the trees grow in them. Is it another God beside Allah? No, but they are people who take others to be equal with Allah.
Who is it that deviate from the right way to the wrong direction, wrong thoughts? Okay.
Who is it that made the earth a stable place to live? Who made the rivers flow through it? Who set immovable mountains on it and created a barrier between the fresh and the salt water? Is it another God besides Allah? No, but most of them do not know. Who is it that answers the distressed when they call upon Him? Who removes their suffering? Who makes you successors in the earth? Is it another God besides Allah? Little notice you take. Who is it that guides you through the darkness on land and sea? Who sends the winds as heralds of good news before His mercy? Is it another God besides Allah? Allah is far above the partners they put beside Him. Who is it that creates life and reproduces it? Who is it that gives you provision from the heavens and earth? Is it another God besides Allah? Say, show me your evidence then, if what you say is true. And that's Surah 27, 59 to 64 inclusive.
Yeah. So here Allah is talking and mentioning certain things He does and the deity cannot do, and challenging Him. Is anyone else participating in that, doing it? Or who is it? Who is it? Show us. And if there's anyone you think there, okay, show me your evidence. Just challenge them. We know they will never have any evidence. It's just imagination, fabrication, stories from the ancient parents and grandparents, cultural commitment, and there's nothing. There is no evidence. It's just thoughts and ideas and imagination, myths and legends. which have cemented them in their mind. That's it. That's not an evidence. That's definitely not an evidence. Cannot be an evidence. Evidence is different. Everyone knows what evidence means. When we talk about evidence, we talk about something at the level of mathematics, proving the Pythagorean theorem. That's an evidence. You go step by step and show by necessity it must be like that. That's a proof. That's an evidence. That's the Burhan. And that has to be brought forward. So here is Allah himself talking and showing that he is the one who has these attributes. None of them is related to any creation in the sense, if anyone acknowledges them or does not acknowledge them, assuming they are factual on the table, is there anyone other entity participating in that or doing similar or able to undermine that? Sure. We're talking about facts there. Is that entity being worshipped or not worshipped, venerated, accepted, loved, hated? That's not relevant. That's not a point here. That's no point here at all. So it has nothing to do with the acts of the creation. It is intrinsic probability of the entity called Ilah, and Allah is the supreme Ilah, the only Ilah actually. But even the name is derived from Ilah, as we discussed in that section. But we saw that the linguistic derivation, the history of the development of the word, did not get us anywhere. And we know the Quran has been revealed like in the 7th century, between 610 and 632, and when the Arabic language reaches full maturity and the development of 1,000 years since the time of Ismail, in that area, Mecca and around, where really the eloquent, polished Arabic by mixing the input from the south and from the Middle Arabia and so on, and choosing the best out of it, is a process which is happening. It looks at face, if you look at from outside, as if it's a historical process, but it is being guided by Allah behind the scene to have a language which will express this meaning as best as possible a human language can do. That's when someone could say, it's not in Chinese. Yes, because Chinese could not develop to such eloquence and does not have the characteristics for the final revelation. It may be enough for a local prophet, for prophet to the Chinese. The same with Hebrew, by the way. Hebrew is not a language for declination and conjugation. It's a frozen language. It's like a dialect of Arabic or Semitic. It's not qualified to bear all the meanings and the power of the Quran. So it has to develop in the depth of Arabia, far away from invader and controller. I'm just giving some historic background, and obviously under the divine watch. So when it reached the maturity, all was planned to reach maturity, the time the final messenger has to come and then seal the prophethood. When the maturity of humanity has reached a certain level, from there then science, technology, philosophy can develop, and the humans can do that by themselves. But there's enough there to have a solid, absolutely firm established base at the time of 610 to 632. Does not mean that more philosophical sophistication and linguistic philosophies are not developed later, but as it starting from that point. That's the point of start from this book. If you start from this book, you will develop the right development. If you deviate from the book and import, for example, Israelite stories and Aramaic myths and things like that, you will end like you find immense tafsir of these funny stories and so on, and attempt explanation things which explains nothing on ancient stories which nobody knows if they are true or verified. And that's exactly what Ibn Wahhab and Ibn Taymiyyah did. They refer to some hadith, to some stories of the people of the book, instead of referring to the fundamental, absolutely irrefutable source, that's the Quran. But carry on now. I wanted to hear that this is Arabic is chosen for really and the seclusion in Arabia for almost 2,000 years, more than 2,000 time of Ismail, far away from invasion, especially Middle Arabia was never invaded. South was partly sometimes invaded from the Persian later, around the time of advent of Islam, and before that by the Abyssinian. And before that, there's nothing known, but it's just local history developing naturally and culturally. Same with North Arabia, from Medina northward. Essentially, there's the other sons of Ismail, the Nabataean, not the sons of Qaida, the one around Mecca. That's where the messenger has come from. It's the second son, actually, not the first son. The first son, they settled in the north, and they mixed with Semites, Aramites, and so on, and they got imported idols from the Babylonian and so on, well before Islam. But that middle area was pure from any paganism until Amr ibn Luhay, which we discussed in the sources of Shirk of the Arab. We discussed that explicitly, and when was that off? Around the time of the coming of Christ, والسلام. And then, but it was not so deep-rooted to falsify or damage the language. It was anyway adding to the perfection of the language. So that's just like a philosophical language background why the revelation comes in this far isolated and secluded place from the whole world. Because it needs to mature, it has to be cooked on a slow fire, become reaching peak nutritional value, and that can be only in seclusion. And that's the reason when Christianity started spreading in the Greek world, in the hand of Paul, it became paganized. The one who was secluded in Palestine and east of it remained relatively pure, but also with contamination. But the one outside could not. The environment would dictate language and all literature of the so-called Christian, which is actually, we should insist on calling Pauline Christian. It's not Christianity of reason. What has remained now since the Nicene Conference is definitely not a Christianity of reason. That one is essentially extinct and revived again in Islam. That's it. So if we talk about the genuine Christianity, the Nazarene, Nasara, that got absorbed by Islam and revived and got cleaned from the mess of accumulation, because of 400, 500 years, 600 years will accumulate a lot of mess and misinterpretation and so on, even with the Nazarene and the so-called Ebionite. But the catastrophe is really that what spread in Asia Minor and then later in Middle Europe and around Rome. That's the so-called Christian, actually Pauline, the Pauline deviation of Christianity or mutilation of Christianity. But let's continue. That's just a small sweetener about history.
Your explanation about the Arabic language, are there any books that are recommended on this?
No, this is my own speculation and thinking. Al-Rafi, Mustafa al-Rafi, an excellent linguist and a man of such superior style that the viewers said that his style in writing is usually prosa, not poetry. He was not a poet. Maybe he have a few poets, but is derived from the revelation. So if the Quran is a revelation from Allah, his style is deduced from the revelation. It sounds and smells like Quranic language, but he's obviously not competing with the Quran because he's deriving from the Quran. If you want to compete with the Quran, you have to get something else which competes with it, not importing from it. Most people who try to challenge the Quran, they, for example, some Christian of the last century, they wrote some verses of the Bible and make sure that it ends with in, Al-Alamin, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, things like that. And so they wrote something similar to the Quran. No, you are imitating the Quran. You are a monkey. Quran means get me something uniquely different, and which language analyst will say, oh, this is a unique new style and a new unique use of words. That cannot exist. It's simply impossible. It cannot. The challenge of Quran is clear. It cannot. Because the Arabic language at the time, it does have poetry, it does have prosa, it does have not really filled or beloved long poetry of stories like Iliada and Homer, things like what they call epics and things like that. Stories, but they have bits of that. And then it came this shocking new style, completely new style. Every chapter is not one topic, several topics, and they arrange sometimes counter-chronological, sometimes chronological. And even the arrangement of the source in the book is, at first, some people think it's arranged by length, but they are refuted quickly. Something is arranged by this, and so the whole is unique. It's a whole new writing style. And still, if you open it, read it from cover to cover, you gain enormous insights and knowledge. So it's not like putting haphazard quotes. You could get a book and say, I will have the quotes from Einstein, quotes from Newton, quotes from Plato, here and there scattered, and it looks like a surah. But that's not homogeneous. That's just quotes. It's not quotes. It's creative prosa put in such a way which is just simply with the first confusing and then later shocking. So, but anyway, go back.
Raf, what's his full name? Rafi? The person you mentioned,
Mustafa al-Rafi. He died in the last century. He's an Arab linguist, and his style is very unique. They call it Tanzil from Tanzil, revelation from revelation, like extracted from the Quran, imitating the Quran, but in a way which is really unique. But it's sub-Quran. It's not a challenge of Quran. He knows that himself. This is I let the Quran style and the taste dictate my direction. So he's but not imitating, he's creatively employing the Quranic style in his writing. Obviously, all his writing, if he writes, for example, an article or something, but the origin of a certain linguistic issue, also because he was a linguist. And he wrote the famous book, The History of Arabic Literature. was the first book in that area for the university. They wanted something like a summary of Arabic literature, poetry, and so on, how it developed from Jahiliyyah to Islam and so on. In response to the of Taha Hussein, miserable work about the Arab Jahiliyyah poetry and things like that, which is just Oriental way of writing, which is completely internally contradictory. That's Taha Hussein, the blind one. So they needed something really based from, extracted from Islamic references and history. And he wrote these 3 volumes. They were printed in 3 volumes. I read them several times from cover to cover. And if you write, for example, a chapter about the Moshahat of Andalusia, they were singing in Cordoba and so on, the whole chapter is about Moshahat. It doesn't suddenly talk about riba and come back like the Quran, things like that. I mean, but how the sentences are structured, how they are formed, they smell Quranic. But that's only by taste. You have to read that too. No, you have to be an Arab reader. So. Good. Okay, just these remarks at the side, more addressing the taste and the general, let's say, rhetoric aspect. It's nothing of that is Burhan, was evidence or proof. Nothing that's at the proof level, but it gives you the frame or the general environment in which you may try to develop a level of proofs.
Okay, brother wants to make a comment. Far away, bruv.
No, sorry, it was just a question for you, Rash. Because I wanted to type on the chat. I wanted to ask you a question on the chat, but it's not letting me think.
Okay, don't worry, you can WhatsApp me. Let's just carry on the halakha, inshallah. Yeah, you can WhatsApp me. Yeah.
WhatsApp or Telegram. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In fact, I can switch on the chat. There's no one nefarious.
Someone possibly has penetrated the chat or detected.
No, that was yeah. It happens on occasion, so yeah, you can chat now. Sure.
Most likely someone who is Hindu to fanatics, idiots.
Yeah. Okay. All right, then I'll continue then. So marvel at the eloquence expressed by the aforementioned verses. From these, we can see that Ilah is the entity or being which is capable of creation, particularly the creation of the heavens and the earth, independently, whether worshipped or not. The one who sends down.
I mean, it is expressed. That is the final meaning which developed over these generation and millennia, and then matured in terms of Quran. The Quran enforced it with these usages. So that's what we regard as the meaning of Ilah, as it should be understood in the peak of Arabic eloquence and in time revelation of the Quran. Because whatever Allah revealed and used a word for it in the Quran overrides even all the use of previous Arabs and Jahiliyyah and even all the time to Ismail and to Adam. It's overrides. Because language is more or less the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it has been enshrined in that He taught Adam all the names. That's it. He gave him the linguistic capabilities and the naming capability. And the development after that, skip started with that. And all the developments is under divine guidance. Maybe we will not see it directly, but it is in the ghaib. It's in the background. You don't see it directly. There's no way to see it directly because this is going in the minds and the genes and complicated situation in the universe which nobody can control completely except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the word Ilah should be used. Instead of revelation of Quran should be used only as the Quran used it. What it was 100 years before or 1,000 years before is completely irrelevant. The same way we talk about Salah, Hafizu ala Salah, meaning a specific set of action and so on called the Salah. That's by setting of the Quran. The original name of Salah, the root Salawa or Salaya, is one of two, either supplicating and making dua and calling, other one is being accelerating and being ahead of anyone else. Yeah. Or the second coming out. So two meanings, they have nothing to do with this Salah. So when we talk about a Salah with Alif Lam, without further explanation, meaning a Salah is defined in the Quran, not what the Arabic origin may have been, and try to connect both. It may be a connection, there may be no connection. Allah is the sovereign. He can use in the Quran words which have been divorced far away from the Arabic origin or close to that in some deeper sense that of the linguistic philologist and philosopher may ponder about these things. They're bigger writing, like Fiqh al-Lugha for Ibn Jinni. This is these things, for example. So you see then obviously that this is a whole area of really work and some of it had done in the past, but I think Rafi revived it recently, but nobody seriously continued that. It needs someone of ingenuity and really devotion. And I'm not aware about someone after Rajihi after Mustafa Rafi'i. There may be few in the Arabic Academy and so on, some of them from India and so on. One of them passed away recently. He was memorizing almost 100,000 verses of poetry and so on. Was the Arabic language par excellence, although it's not an Arab. But these are more classical, more the issue of protecting the meaning, caring for the dictionaries, improving them, and so on. But someone really creative, going in the philology, in the philosophy of language, like Ibn Jinni and so on, nothing came since the time of Ibn Jinni and all. That's the 4th or 5th Islamic century. Since then, it's just essentially regurgitating. Nobody has any breakthrough, maybe in one word and something like that, but really systematic, completing what Ibn Jinni started, fiqh al-lugha, the fiqh, the deep understanding of language, developing as a real science, and study or topic in the university, teaching topic. I don't think there's anyone did anything much more after Ibn Jinni, much more, a bit here and there, yes, but nothing much more. It has to be revived, but that's not our issue today. Carry on. So the point is that when the Quran uses a word which maybe have controversial origin, confusing past long history, like ilah, we discussed in the section, remember, and we concluded that the history where the root of the word was, what the original il means, most likely means master again, and so on, is irrelevant. The one the Quran uses is the binding one until Yawm al-Qiyamah, and the one who should be used in any discourse relating to the revelation and to Islam. Good? That's the point to be stressed.
Continue. Marvel at the eloquence expressed by the aforementioned verses. From these we can see that the ilah is the entity or being which is capable of creation, particularly the creation of the heavens and the earth independently, whether worshipped or not. The one who sends water down from the sky, causing beautiful gardens to grow, done by way of its own intrinsic power, independently, whether worshipped or not, meaning irrespective of human agency or even existence. Following this, the verses continue in enumerating the attributes of ilah that make
the reason for stressing that worshipped or not, or venerated or not, is because Wahhabi definition of ilah is that the one who is being worshipped. So making the worship primary. Essentially, what the Wahhabi are saying is that exactly what the communists are saying. People are making their own ilah. If you declare something to be ilah and venerated, then it becomes ilah by your action. Nothing intrinsically there. That's if we analyze the Wahhabi statement and go to the extreme, they don't say it directly like that. It would be clear kufr. But essentially, they are not far away from the atheists and communists. The communists say all these ilahs of the human, they exist. Human mind constructed them, and they declared to be ilah. And that's the way ilahs emerged, by human development and addressing them as such and showing veneration and things like that. Obviously, it is mocking that there is no ilahs like that. They do not exist. Or the Wahhabi believe they exist. Like the grave of Sayyid al-Badawi in Egypt is an ilah because people venerate that or seek barakah there. Then suddenly it turns into a deity by this. So humans make their ilah, which is catastrophic, really catastrophic. Based the Iman Islam on that is a real catastrophe, an unbelievable catastrophe. It's actually a statement of kufr itself. But because these people are ignorant and blind, we don't declare it to be a kafir. So just that they are mentally, they are retards. Such a statement can come only from one retard who does not read the ayah in the Quran. But they never read. And if they read, they don't see. And if they see, they don't understand. And few of them, if they understand, they stay stubborn. And these are most likely than kafir, like some madkhali and so on. But anyway, well, that's not our topic today. But the reason I'm saying worship it or not, worship it or not, worship it or not.
Following this, the verses continue in enumerating the attributes of al-ilah that make him befitting of that title, God or deity, in considerable detail. These cover the matter of creating the earth with its wondrous mountains and rivers, making the earth a suitable abode for life, responding to the call of the distressed, guiding them through the darkness of land and sea. Additionally, there is the relief given to the suffering, appointing mankind as vice-regents upon the earth, initiating creation and repeating it, and so on and so forth. All of this is done by his inherent power, independently, regardless of any human agency relating to whether he is worshipped or not. Hence, there is no point in seeking proof from people for the supposed existence of us such attributes in the imaginary false deities, as the verse says, is it another God besides Allah? Say, show me your evidence then, if what you say is true.
Mhm.
And that's
Claim,
27.
show your evidence or proof for your claim.
Here the challenge presumes that those addressed, or at least some of them, believe that their deities are in possession of either all or some of these attributes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they could have responded with a definitive reply in arguing that they never actually claimed as such. So why they need to ask for proof? Far be it from Allah that there could exist anyone who could silence, refute, or establish evidence against him. There is also similar proof covered in the previous volume, as it states to the verse of Fasad. There is copious knowledge and wisdom contained within it. Taken together with the contextual verses, this reads as follows. I'll read the translation, and this is going to be 29, 50, 1964. We did not create the heavens and the earth and everything between them playfully. If we had wished for a pastime, we could have found it within us. If we had wished for any such thing, no, we held the truth against the falsehood, and truth obliterates it. See how falsehood vanishes away. Woe to you, people, for the way you describe Allah. Everyone in the heavens and earth belongs to him, and those that are with him are never too proud to worship him, nor do they grow weary. They glorify him tirelessly night and day. Have they chosen any gods from the earth who can give life to the dead? If there had been in the heavens or earth any gods besides gods but him, both heavens and earth would be in ruins. Allah, Lord of the throne, is far above the things they say. He cannot be called to account for anything he does, whereas they will be called to account.
The subject of accounting or questioning is impossible. As I explained in another time elsewhere, maybe we'll come again to it, that questioning Allah's meaning, essentially, you negate reason. You annihilate reason. There's no reason left anymore. It's a state of madness that which nothing can be asserted, nothing can be proved, or everything can be proved and everything can be disproved. That's a state of madness. That's a magic reality, a magic universe, not a rational universe.
Have they chosen to worship other gods instead of him? Say, bring your proof. This is the scripture for those who are with me, and the scripture for those who went before me. But most of them do not recognize the truth. So they pay no heed. We never sent any message before you, Muhammad, without revealing to him, there is no God but me, so worship me. And they say, the Lord of mercy has taken offspring for himself. May he be exalted. No, they are only his honored servants. They do not speak before he speaks, and they act by his command. He knows what is before them and what is behind them, and they cannot intercede without his permission. Indeed, they themselves stand in awe of him. If any of them were to claim, I am God besides him, we would reward them with hell. This is how we reward evildoers. That's verse 20,
so
21.
This is the chain of ayah which contain the ayat al-fasad. If there were other deity, heavens and earth, they would be ruined. Notice in the ayah, he talks about the one with Allah in heavens, people conception in heavens, as usually angels and entities like that. And Allah said that they are servants as a created being, but they are elevated in certain functionality. And then normally people add to that certain deity, usually a demonic or satanic entity from earth. So the next question, are there in earth something else? In heavens, I have no knowledge. I have the knowledge and tell you that these are created beings, and they never grow weary from submission, supplication, and so on to him, and execute his commands meticulously without any rebellion, anything like that. That's the angels. And some myths around that they may be something of divine origin is also refuted by the Quran and also by reason. But in the Quran is that the one who is supposed to be their father or the originator, the one who gave birth to them, says they don't exist. It's not actually, the rational arguments show that it's impossible. They cannot exist. They're not impossible and so on. But it's enough in that case for Allah to tell you they don't exist. You are imagining. Which proof you have? Must be from Allah himself. Previous revelation, bring me anything. The other, in the case of earth, that may be your imagination or you found somewhere. Show me what are these and what they can do. Yeah, so that's comprehensively covering all these things. And language used is the language even a simple Arab can understand on the back of a canvas. At the same time, a philosopher in the Plato's Academy in Athens will understand. It spans the whole spectrum from very simple, straightforward language of the simplest man to a very sophisticated, philosophically expanded language. There's a various layers of the ayah. So that's what which also was discussed partly in the refutation of Ibn Taymiyyah's claim that ayat al-fasad does not mean that's what it really means, because we have the ayat al-tamanu, that's impossible to have any creation if there are other deity, genuine deity competing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember the ayah of Surah Al-Mu'minun, we just read it in tafsir actually, that Allah has no sons, no offsprings, and there is another deity beside him. They would everyone would take his creation and go away, or they try to dominate each other. Since this is visibly not the case, the universe is well tuned, well connected, seems to be under the same law and the same control, so couldn't exist. And rationally, it's impossible for other deity to exist, because it will lead to no universe whatsoever. But there's another option, that the deity may have been created by Allah when it started rebellion, became then somehow divine, from non-divine to divine, like the evil one and things like that. And that's the ayat al-fasad cover that. Even if after creation something like that emerged somehow, which is impossible, but if it's so, then the creation would have been corrupted. But it's not corrupted. It's going smoothly and correctly forward. And the sun is doing its job. For billions of years, the earth is rotating in such a balanced way, so life and the winds blow in the right direction, and the distribution of temperature is proper, and so on, etc., etc. So you see how it works. Yeah.
Once again, there would be no meaning contained therein to the demand for proof for them for the existence of such attributes in their deities, if those who are addressed, or at least some of them, did not actually believe that their deities possess either some or all of the attributes as enumerated.
Yeah.
The people would have responded evidently with a decisive reply: "We never claimed as such." Following this, the verses quickly invalidate the notion of ascribing offspring to Allah. May He be glorified and exalted. He refutes any attempt to level the claim that their supposed deities are the children of Allah, while lacking any part in creation, control, or governance, which were the subjects of the prior argument. Here we can repeat what has been elucidated thus far, or something similar to it. He, the Exalted, says, "Your Lord creates what He pleases, and chooses those He will. They have no choice, so glory be to Allah, and may He be exalted above the partners they ascribe to Him. Your Lord knows what their hearts conceal and what they reveal. He is Allah, there is no God but Him. All praise belongs to Him in this world and the next. His is the judgment, and to Him you shall be returned." Say, Prophet.
So the other option is that this heavenly being, there's no problem with fasad, no problem with tamana, because they're completely submissive, they're completely obedient, they're completely in love with their father, but they are divine somehow. So we can't call them, at least for shafa', they're so dear to their father that their intercession would be accepted, because they are somehow Christianity tried, Pauline Christianity tried to solve that in the Nicene Conference by making him being born before the time, being not created but born, but me and Isa, and the same with the Holy Spirit. That the Holy Spirit is very secondary in Christianity, very the poor guy. But Isa, because the focus is actually on Isa. The name Christianity is befitting because it goes around crowd, just about Allah, like the Nazarene and the other monotheist Christian, which got extinct and revived and absorbed by Islam. They developed that by saying he's completely submissive, he's completely in tune with his father, he's just a copy of his father, he is an okonom or personality of his father. The son is not the father, but both of them are sharing divinity in some sense. That's essentially the Trinity. They try to solve it this way, because there's no issue of tamana, there's no mamana. One is absolutely submissive and obedient to the father, absolutely without any condition, and so on. So there will be no conflict, there will be anything like that. That may be a solution, but that solution requires that Allah can have offsprings. But he reports that is not true, and from the rational development, which is a bit deep, the Quran never addresses directly. It just mentions it as a fact, as a report. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He neither begets nor he is begotten, as a fact, referring to much deeper, complicated metaphysical arguments and mathematical arguments to show that's impossible, that for the necessity existing to be multiple and split or divide. So that's in this area is enough to have the report from the alleged father. I have no offspring. That's not true. It's impossible for me to have offspring. Then we have either to accept him, accept what he said, because the absolute truth, or deny him. Then we say that there's no God in the first place. So we are not getting away even with rejecting a report. You reject the report, then the one who gave the report is a liar. But it cannot be if it's a divine being. Otherwise, it's an imposter. So give me a real revelation where the divine being himself says, I have offspring. None. Nowhere. Now, the Old Testament, New Testament, no, even in Brahman books, it doesn't exist. It's people claiming that in his behalf. And in any respectable revelation, he says, no, it's not there. There's nothing. And see, he's the absolute truth. He must be telling the truth. But you can't prove in a metaphysical because it's very deep. It's unlikely to be addressed in any revelation directly like that. It cannot be addressed like the proof of tamanu. The ayat tamanu give you a clear proof, a real proof the way mathematics works. In that case, you have to go such a depth that it's not suitable for being addressed to all human beings. It's only a few philosophers. Enough to address them that the alleged father say, I'm not father. You are lying. So you have to accept that. If he's really one talking. If he's not talking, get us somewhere where he is talking and tell us. Otherwise, you are speculating from your own head. Yeah. So that's enough proof in that case for the matter of offsprings. You don't need to bring something sophisticated like tamanu. But tamanu is relatively reasonably simple so that even with some effort, a Bedouin will understand it. That are necessarily existing, so deep things like that, which almost border on mathematical precision, that needs really people belonging to a philosophical academy, and not all humans are like that. So they're not addressed. They're addressed only by that the report is being true or false, which is also absolute. Because by definition, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the supreme being, the necessarily existing one, is the absolute truth. They cannot lie. So he must be telling the truth now. So your claim these are offsprings, are not just created being who is complete obedience and executing the commands at their order, is false. It must be false. And this is the proof enough, based on the premises that Allah is absolute truth and never lies, the most truthful one, by necessity of reason. So, but this every human being understands that automatically. Assuming there's an entity like that, then he must be truthful. There's no other way. Otherwise, reason will collapse. Nothing can be asserted rationally. A Bedouin will not argue this complicated way, but he will perceive it immediately by feeling, by internal perception right away. Yeah.
All right, enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Salam. No, well, you kind of answered it already. I was going to ask, how do you know? If someone's to ask, how do you know that this being is always speaking the truth and is always
necessary? Because if he is not the truth, then no knowledge can be asserted. Every statement can be true and false at the same time, because our statements are true based that we have a rational competence, but this reason is created by him, because he's the creator, the only. That's the first reason. But if he created a faulty device, then then it doesn't make any sense. We cannot recognize him, and he cannot ask, why didn't you believe? Because you lied to us. We don't know what to think. You may be telling the truth, maybe you're telling the truth. So he must be truthful by necessity. He must be the haqq in himself. If there's any haqq besides that, then nothing exists. That's a complicated argument, all this pseudo-philosophical, but people perceive it internally.
Yeah. Let me digest it a bit, inshallah, and then inshallah.
It is not like some philosophers said it is a moral injunction which is valid for Allah. No, it is the being of Allah is necessarily the truth. Because the necessary existing means exist without any reason for existence. He is himself reason. And this is the truth which cannot be denied. Neither he nor anybody can is denied. And his knowledge is within this truth. His attributes, all of them within the truth. If this is the primary absolute truth is questioned, then everything down there will question. And then we are dealing not with the rational universe. What we call rational competence is actually irrational. It's just magic. It's nonsensical. It's very well possible that tomorrow the sun disappear and one day after tomorrow reappear again with no reason whatsoever, because reason doesn't exist anymore. If Allah is not the truth, the Creator is not the truth. This is existing because is not the truth by himself. In his word and in his revelation, also in action. There's no falsehood there whatsoever. No fallacy whatsoever. It can't be. The reason is ill-defined. And the whole reality, the whole surrounding universe, the whole thing, existing reality around us is just an imagination and magic. That's the other alternative. But magic cannot be magic, and so on. And really, someone like that should be in the mental institution. Maybe some people in the mental institution will decline to that level, but I'm not aware about any story of this type. Usually, they have problem with the truth and the truth table and the truth assignment for a certain limited area. Otherwise, they could not be living. How can they live? You know that you need food to survive by experience. If you stop from that, say, oh, that's the wrong conclusion. What I'm feeling is not true. There's nothing there. Then you will die. It will disappear. You see, it's impossible. It's a state which is a state of sickness, which you either get out of it or you die away. That's it. There's no other way. But this can be developed in a structural way, in a more detailed way. But again, going to the finite reason of humans and assuming it is reasonable and the conclusion makes sense. If we assume that nothing makes sense, then nothing can make sense. Yeah. Everything becomes nonsensical.
Okay, continuing with the bunch of ayahs. Say, just think, if Allah were to cast perpetual day over you until the day of resurrection, what God other than He could give you night in which to rest? Do you not see? In His mercy, He has given you night and day so that you may rest and seek His bounty and be grateful. The day will come when He will call out to them, saying, where are the partners you claimed for me? We shall call a witness from every community and say, produce your evidence. And then they will know that truth belongs to Allah alone. The gods they invented will forsake them. Once again, as previously outlined, there would be no meaning here in demanding the producing of evidence from them for the existence of such attributes in their alleged deities. If those addressed, or at least some of them, did not actually believe that their deities possessed all, or at the very least, some of these attributes, otherwise the people or some of them would have responded with the same silencing and decisive reply that they never claimed as such, may Allah forbid. He, the exalted and majestic, says, so just to recap, so those verses were 28, 68 to 75. So next verse, but for those who believe and do righteous deeds, there will be gardens of bliss where they will stay. That is Allah's true promise, and He is the Almighty, the All-Wise. He created the heavens without any visible support, and He placed mountains on the earth in case it should shake under you, and He spread all kinds of animals around it. We sent down water from the sky, with which we made every kind of good plant grow on earth. All this is Allah's creation. Now show me what your other gods besides Him have created. No, the disbelievers are clearly astray. Also note here the wording of the specific demand or challenge. Now show me what your other gods besides Him have created, which would be meaningless if the address did not believe, if the addressees did not believe, addressees did not believe that some created things were indeed the product of their supposed gods and not of Allah. Otherwise, again, the people could have provided definitive responses in arguing that we never claimed our gods created any such things whatsoever. None can provide a rebuttal to Allah, let alone mount a challenge against His evidences.
And this is trivial, but if you deal with people who think that some people are worshipping stone, knowing it is a stone, it does nothing, and still they worship it and submit to it, then you have problem talking to such people. That's exactly what the Wahhabis said. They believe that what Allah says about the idols, they're just stone. They have no divinity whatsoever, as the mushrikeen imagine. They thought that's what the mushrikeen believe. That's the problem. They confuse what Allah is telling, the reality of the idols, with what the mushrikeen believe in the idols. They think the mushrikeen believe it's a stone, it doesn't do anything, it doesn't see, it is blind, etc. And instead submit to them and ask their help and so on. How could this be possible? It's impossible. But this is an unbelievable misreading of the statement of the Quran about the idols. Now, I say, are these idols having this, doing this, meaning that's their reality. Mushrikeen will say, no, they do that. We have experienced it. Well, sometimes we hear someone talking from inside the idol. Sometimes it drinks milk, like the famous story 10, 15 years ago about Ganesha, and things like that. Mushrikeen will respond, no, they are told they are something. They're not just like the people of Ibrahim. When he said, what are these statues, these artwork is? Say, no, it's not an artwork. These are gods. They're not just a mere artwork. They said that it was connected to them, making them then conduit to the god, body of the god, things like that. They have something divine, not just the stone. The stone, that's the idol. The one who cut them and represent them, he knows he's doing a certain artwork. That's no problem, making a temple in itself. But certain ritual, certain procedure, make it suitable for the divine to express them through them. So they become divine in that sense. Ibrahim, we are mistaken. They are not tamathil. They are not just artwork. They are more than that. Yeah. So, but it seems to be many Wahhabis fail to understand that. Confusing what Allah said about the reality of the idols with that what the Mushrikeen believed about the idols. Which is, I have difficulty every time I think about that to get that in my mind. In which mind can that go? Meaning these people are mindless. Instead of having some gray material in their heads, they seem to be have like a hole there. It's like a drum, empty. Really, it's not a mockery or making a joke. There's no explanation for that otherwise.
Your clinical diagnosis.
Yeah. You fail to explain that.
Okay. Next section: mutual hindrance. The second set of conclusive arguments upon this matter are in relation to the verse which was covered in the previous volume of this series regarding that of tamanu, mutual hindrance.
Mutual hindrance, yeah.
Taken together with the verse relating to fasad, these provide cogent, compelling evidence. He, the mighty and sublime, as expressly said, Allah has never had a child, nor is there any God beside him. If there were, each god would have taken his creation aside and tried to overcome the others. May Allah be exalted above what they describe. From the wording of this verse, we can discern that either this being acting by will and free choice possesses complete and absolute freedom by way of its own inherent power independently. It is the one who creates, reigns supreme over others, subjugates without being overcome or rivaled. It has the ability of granting protection without no need for it itself. None has the ability to pursue it or escape it by flight. Or is it a being which is born of a divine entity, thus making it a member of a divine kind or divine species? All of these are considerations.
These are the offspring, so these are the primary deities possible in the rational discourse. There are the secondary deities like idols and so on, where a divine being is connecting through, setting inside, contained in, and there's a secondary aspect. That's the meaning when, for example, the most Pauline Christian now say about Maryam that she's the mother of God. So it's divine in that sense because she contained a God in her belly for a certain time. So they gained an attribute of divinity in that. It's a secondary divinity. She's neither herself an offspring nor one of these entities. They don't claim either. So the reason say, oh, we don't declare her to be there in that sense. No, she's a secondary divine in a secondary sense. But the original one, the fundamental ones, is that either a member of divine clan, an offspring or something like that, or an independent entity which has unlimited power and can challenge Allah in some aspects, at least in certain areas. Minimum is that they can run away from and hide. That's sufficient to make them in that sense. But it's only possible if the jinn were believing that they can hide from Allah or run away from him. But that's impossible. And that's the reason people are worshipping jinn because of this feature, that they can challenge Allah. So they are really genuinely divine in that sense. It doesn't mean to have all the divine aspects, but at least one of them. If he has one of them, he will have the other ones automatically. But this is dictated by philosophical, metaphysical argument. But most Bedouins and simple mushrikeen are far away from that level anyway. They're just so primitive, but still, claiming that the jinn can escape from Allah and hide from him, so we're unable to apprehend them, that's enough. That's the tamana. Tamana will work right away. That's impossible.
All of these considerations are matters which are existential, namely relating to the evidence of that being and the actions it undertakes. There is no connection whatsoever to the existence or non-existence of other beings who would submit and humble themselves before it, drawing near with love, fear, devotion, seeking to glorify and sanctify
What
or
people
any
usually
entities,
ibadah, we do it for worship and the various aspects of worship.
be they related to bowing, prostration, offering, and sacrifice, and that have been referred to with the term or definition of God or deity. Thus, following on from this, the correct meaning, the term ilah, God deity, is al-ilah, God deity, is a being who acts by way of absolute will and free choice, possessor of inherent power related to independent action that is completely non-autonomous from all others, with creation and subjugation being among its most distinctive acts, though not limited to these. Or it is a being which is born of a divine entity, thus being an individual member of the divine type or divine species. So that's the definition of
so that's the complete definition. That's exactly the definition in programming language. That an expression is either one of the letters A, B, C, D, and so on, and numbers, yeah, or something derived going back to that one. That's called the recursive definition, but it has a starting point. The starting point is the genuine divinity, the one with absolute freedom and unlimited power. And then from that, we may imagine that we can deduce that there are offspring, so completely submissive, there will be no tamanu, and so on. But that's prohibited in the Quran, is clearly by the divine declaration, doesn't exist, and Allah is absolutely truthful, so it has to be. Otherwise, no sense to study the Quran in the first place or study anything whatsoever. Or with a more sophisticated, deep argument philosophically, which is hinted to in the Quran in one place, when Allah used about himself, yambaghi. When Allah used for himself, yambaghi, meaning it is by necessity of reason and necessity of the nature of Allah, his being existing, it's impossible. ما ينبغي الرحمن يتخذ ولدا. It's impossible for the divine to have a son. Even if we speculatively think he may wish, but he will never wish, because this means he has a weakness in his perception of the truth. Because the intention to have sons is a created being, because they die, they are terminal, and they need support and so on. None of that applies to us. So if Allah wishes something, meaning he thinks that he is deficient in some sense, but that's impossible. So that's even not possible. Even willing or wishing to have. It's impossible. If you translate ينبغي here in the case used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is impossible in itself, intrinsically. And the evidence can be developed in a metaphysical way, similar to mathematical proofs. So that's hinted in the Quran, but it's because it's so deep and complex, it's enough to rely on Allah's reports. The alleged father say, I'm father of nobody, and I'm descending from nobody. If that's not true, then the whole thing, the whole discourse, the whole reading of the Quran, the whole revelation, all this, it does not make any sense. Nothing makes any sense anymore. Reason will collapse.
By way perhaps of a more lenient alternative phrase, one could postulate that al-ilah, God or deity, is fundamentally a supernatural being. So next section is on Ibn Taymiyyah's substitutes. At this junction, we should hasten to add that the proof underpinning that of al-tamannu, mutual hindrance, is that we have set out in this what we have set out in this present book, which in essence is based upon what Imam Ibn Taymiyyah elucidated in his works.
Yeah, however, he developed excellently, but he has one main catastrophic blunder, which we mention now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
However, that has been refined with significant modifications being made to the text. The reason being is that Ibn Taymiyyah utilized the term Rabb instead of the correct word, which is covered by the text of Revelation, that of Ilah. By making that substitution, it stood at odds with the explicit wording of the verse. Many examples of this can be shown. For example, in the following, where Ibn Taymiyyah said, if it is assumed that there are two lords, Rabban, independence becomes impossible. Yeah. Rather, the correct wording should have been two gods, Ilahan.
Yeah, that's my attack, is that in that context, the Quran used the word Ilah. What did Ibn Taymiyyah to do Rabb? most likely because his false division of Tawheed, of the Rububiyyah and Uluhiyyah, and he thinks in this context, Rabb and Ilah are exactly equal. But exactly equal how? How come that Ilah become Rabb exactly? Because when you say Ilah and Rabb are sometimes joined together and sometimes they mean various meanings. This is a sophistry way of playing games with the words. In that context, it is Ilah in the Tamanu. It cannot be Rabb because he defined Rabb as the one who sustains, the one who nurtures, the one, etc. Not the one who creates. So he's all his evidence, all the otherwise except the word, the correct word, it is meticulous and irrefutable. It's one of the most excellent, well-developed Tamanu argument, without any doubt. Without any doubt. But he spoiled everything, annihilated everything by using the word Rabb instead of Ilah. Everywhere you use Rabb, not Ilah. As if he's telling, essentially, obviously, if we have bad intention, we'll say he's doing it deliberately, correcting the Quran. That will be clear. So we're not assuming that. We say he was blinded. It's just a moment of a blind spot. He doesn't see what is there. And this is blindness. Because he started definition which are not derived from the Quran, probably, just for certain speculative things and assumption, and also try to enforce that Arabs did not have shirk in Rububiyyah. Their shirk is only in Uluhiyyah, which is absurd. We have discussed that before, I think, when we go to the Arab, the various ayahs or whatever they conclude from that. And that's the whole catastrophe. That's the whole what will undermine all this triplet division and the definition of Ilah and Rabb and all the Wahhabi issue of Ibadah and graves and all this is depending on that. The moment that is checked away, it's finished. And they do that, they say it clearly. The Mutakallimin definition of Tawheed is wrong. The Tawheed for the Mutakallimin, for the theologian, like Al-Kalam and so on, Maturidi, Ash'ari, is the one, the only creator. He's the creator. So, no, it's not a creator. It's the only one worshipped. And that's the catastrophe standard there. Because they wanted to make touching the grave or kissing it, suddenly making the grave a deity and making you a mushrik out of the whole Islam. They wanted that dearly. Whatever motivation, I don't know. But they wanted that dearly. With the result, it backfired in annihilating really Tawheed completely. Then they get into a mockery, which is called Wahhabi Tawheed definition. Originally, at least, they tried to improve on it, and like a last edition, which had been taught in school, Abu Wahab told me that they define Ibadah not as standing as obedience. That's a much better step forward, but it will undermine their original. So how can you worship a grave? Do you obey a grave? What does it mean? So again, you're going back to the Aqidah, and the issue is creator or not creator. So there's no escape from that, except by cutting this circularity. Circularity is to say, what is the fundamental one, and what is Ibadah and worship and the veneration, all of it is derived, they're secondary. The thing is directed towards a deity. So deity has to be established first, and then these things. And then all other things like worshipping graves, grave worship, all this will just flow away. There to be like a smoke screen which has no substance. It's gone away. That is a wind, it's gone away. It's just a product of sick mentality, or someone who is having some kind of allergic reaction to some Sufi activities, which look for him extreme. But he wouldn't want to show that it's illegitimate or haram or something like that. He wants more. He wants to get out of Islam, declare it to be kufr. He wants to dispatch it completely. With the result, he dispatched it himself, destroyed himself instead of destroying them. Because the argument is not destroyed by that. Because the argument is definitely not so structured that it persuades anybody, except the one born in a Wahhabi environment, that's one grown up. So he's blinded. The moment he starts thinking about that, he will be in a state of shock. Like when I was discussing with someone before leaving Saudi Arabia, say, I was amazed. I read someone who was discussing the issue, say, even sujood is not ibadah. And he said he's invoking the example of the sujood of Yusuf to and the family of Yaqub to Yusuf, and the sujood of the angel to So he was thinking that the mere sujood is ibadah automatically. And he was reminded of these things. He was in a state of shock. He doesn't want to punish. Because the fundamental definition of ibadah, he regarded ibadah as certain acts, a list of acts that called ibadah. It's not. It is thing directed toward what he believed to be a divinity. That's it. That solves all the problems. Now touching graves and kissing them and so on and making even sujood to them, maybe bid'ah, maybe haram in certain, but it has to be scrutinized what, why, and how it is done. That's what we have to scrutinize. But this is too heavy and complicated and sophisticated job for Ibn Taymiyyah did a bit of sophistication, a slight bit, because he's still a great mind. But these are just a mindless follower of Muhammad al-Wahhab. And he continued with the age of thought of Ibn Taymiyyah and continued until its extreme limit. That's the reason Muhammad al-Wahhab in one of his writing, I quoted this somewhere, weirdly, verbal, as produced by his followers in the Fatawa Najdiyya and other collection. He says, when you worship a grave like Sayyid al-Badawi, the moment you believe in it, whatever belief you have, you made the grave of yourself, you made him not Ilah, Allah. He went to that extreme because he was consistently following. Instead of recognizing state of shock, there must be something wrong, he insisted on it and started then fighting the people and killing them and getting busy with booty and wars and so on. That's it. It's completely blind. But we need to expand in every small detail. It becomes even sometimes boring. Sometimes boring, really. But I need to repeat it. So there will no doubt remaining anywhere. And even in these final formulation, I think a side sentence, a clarification point should be added to make it even more crystal clear. It's very clear now, but in some places it could be crystallized further. It should be done in the next edition, inshallah. Yeah, carry on.
Okay, if it is assumed that there are two lords in cooperation where neither acts without the assistance of the other, which is mentioned
in Taymiyyah's word, using Rab, translated as Lord,
which is mentioned in the work entitled Minhaj as-Sunnah an-Nabawiyyah, here, probably as a result of an error made by the editor, publisher, or even both, they placed this under the chapter heading of the impossibility relating to the existence of two lords for creation. Next bullet point. Hence, it is clear that it is impossible for the temporal world to have two lords. That's so it's got references in the appendix for those who are interested.
What the meaning is that having two creators, that's it. But they are running away from word created. This will be what a mutakallimin, the theologian, the Ash'ari, the Maturidi is saying, which he is rejecting and attacking them. That's number one. And secondly, without noticing that they are just slandering the Quran face to face, which use the word ilah.
If there are two lords, the separate creation of each would be distinct from the other, as Allah the Almighty says, nor is there any...
You see, the word creation is used there. They can't run away from it because this one has his creation, this has creation. If they were consistent, they would say the slaves of the one is different than the slaves of the other. If they had the word Rabb there. But internally, it's rebel inside you. Because the ayah says clear that every deity will take away its creation or try to dominate the other one. That's the ayat al-Tamanus. There's no escape from the word ilah and creation. But they want to run away from that. They want to say the characteristics of a deity, the fundamental characteristics of a deity, according to Mutakallimin and according to Quran and Sunnah, obviously, is that the entity which creates. That's the most fundamental, significant characteristic we see as creation of being. The most characteristic. The deeper one, like existing an eternal life and so on, that's a bit deeper, but it's mentioned also Quran, Hayy al-Qayyum, etc. But in that one, is that the one we present itself as the first point which we, when we address anything related to divinity, worship and things like that. But they want to say, no, the most important characteristic of a divinity is that being worshipped by someone else. So they insist on that, so that they can get a grave honoration or building or something from outside Islam into shirk and kufr. Instead of being maybe bid'ah, maybe haram, maybe halal, maybe doing the fiqh properly, instead, no, they run away to make it an issue of aqidah. That's the usual escape way for all these deviants and so on. They turn something which is maybe an issue of fiqh and so on, which maybe there are various points of view and they're competing, or there's no major fundamental problem. Even if it's haram, still it's only haram. It's not taking of the called Islam. It's just a divine prohibition. Instead of that, they want to make it dictated by necessity of the fundamentation of the religion to be outside of the religion. It's shirk and kufr. That's what. Why is the desire? What offended Ibn Taymiyyah by Mutakallimin and so on? We have to study his history and his notes to find the psychology. But this is a study which is irrelevant for us. We're not studying psychology of Ibn Taymiyyah or psychology of Ibn Abdul Wahhab and just their motivation, their psychological problem. We study the objective things as they are. as the community of rational being can judge by analysis and in the interaction and discussion. So I discuss with you, discuss with me, you clarify things, because I'm alone. Maybe you conclude something to be approved and write it down, but I'm deceived somewhere. But if I interact with someone, that's the reason we do scientific publication. So other scientists could verify and double check and criticize and back and forth. That's the way science progresses, and philosophy and everything, even mathematics. Because even the best mathematician in the world may make a blunder which is not visible at that moment, and that can be detected later and open new avenues of research.
As Allah the Almighty says, nor is there any God beside him. If there were, each God would have taken his creation aside and tried to overcome the others. Next bullet point: there are other aspects. And other aspects show the impossibility of two lords, each of them helping or hindering the other. So again, that's Ibn Taymiyyah. That finishes that those bullet points. So continuing with your commentary. Given the aforementioned quotes from Ibn Taymiyyah, one can evidently see them in totality. They contradict the text of the Quran, which specifically uses the term ilah, God, deity. Doesn't use the word Rabb, Lord, in any of those contexts originally.
Yeah.
All of that was done in the futile attempt to try and apply his flawed definition of Rububiyyah and Uluhiyyah within.
Yeah, that's he started with that and got stuck with it until he fell in the abyss, in the irrational abyss. Because his final conclusion is irrational, is an abyss.
Compounding this, Ibn Taymiyyah was forced to excessively use the word incorrect approach to the definition of Tawheed. Compounding this, Ibn Taymiyyah was forced to exclusively use the term Qadir, when outlining his line of argumentation, which necessitates considering the matter of al-Qudra, ability, particularly as it relates to considering the matter, as it relates to the ability to create, as a key element in understanding the word ilah. That necessarily contradicting his flawed definition of uluhiyyah itself. Such errors are not minor nor easily overlooked. They are destructive and fatal errors in these critical definitions, which has the propensity to lead one to kufr. This matter will be clarified throughout the forthcoming chapters. Rather, we have sought to fundamentally deconstruct and demolish this train of thought from its very foundations by the way of this present book, by the help and mercy of Allah the Almighty.
But we'll do branches of that and so on, return them to origin and show contradiction in the branches just as an added sweetener. We did not need that, but we wanted to leave nothing unturned. In some places, it becomes almost boring. Like I was discussing sujood or discussing standing in a certain way, in a respectful manner, silent way, and so on, in front of the flag. Well, the Wahhabi say that standing itself is an act of worship, and then the flag has become a divine for you. And you are a mushrik kafir if you do that for the flag. That's what they exactly say. Standing in front of the flag is a certain way with certain formalities and a certain structure. If you do that, then you have made the flag your God and divinity, and you are kafir out of the fold of Islam. Explicitly, it's not implicitly. They said explicitly in certain of their literature. Later ones, that's not Ibn Abdul Wahhab. There was no, at the time, they don't have flag respect and all these giving the salam to the flag, or all these formalities of modern armies and things like that. You see how catastrophic that proceeds.
At this juncture,
but even these branches, sub-notes, we discuss in detail. Although it didn't need, just say, this contradicts of that, very soon we have established that, but we go even there step by step.
At this juncture, we would be swift to point out that Ibn Taymiyyah's error in substituting the word Rabb for the word Ilah in the context of discussing the proof and verse relate to mutual hindrance should not be construed as being malicious and done with deliberate intent. May Allah forbid that. Rather, we would argue that this was a mistake, grave and heinous, but a mistake nonetheless, be that caused by a temporary lapse, a parting absence of reason, or blindness of insight. Yeah. Otherwise, it would in reality be a clear objection to Allah, may be exalted. It would be as it's saying to Allah, the word employed in the text of the Quran is done in error. The term Rabb should have been used instead of the word Ilah. Without question, such a notion would be explicit, clear kufr. Even if the
Absolutely.
matter of this mistake made by Ibn Taymiyyah were to be judged from the perspective of the Orientalist, one beguiled by kufr and explicit denial of the Prophet ﷺ, if be upon him, such an individual is bestowed with a modicum of knowledge, reason, and fairness, would undoubtedly conclude that the wording of ilah is more fitting to express the matters as discussed than the word Rabb. The Orientalists, by and large, ascribe authorship of the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ, and even readily concede he was a pure Arab by tongue and lineage raised in Mecca, Arabic being his mother tongue. The regions surrounding Mecca at the time of revelation, including Ta'if and the tribes that were residing there, is the very heartland and source of the classical Arabic language. The Prophet ﷺ didn't have to undertake years of arduous study to acquire the language, nor travel to achieve that. It was his mother tongue. He was nurtured in the environment itself. By way of contrast, Ibn Taymiyyah was born in the Levant, in Harran, being most likely of Kurdish descent. His native tongue was Levantine Arabic. Learning the classical form of the language through books, teachers, and arduous study. The Prophet ﷺ grew up in Arabia, which was under the dark cloud of shirk, an environment in which idols dominated. Evidently, he would have heard the stories, myths, and common speak of the Arabs in relation to this, witnessing the rituals of the dark cults of shirk, particularly during the pilgrimage season. His direct relative, his uncle Abu Lahab, was one of the custodians of the false gods. By way of stark contrast, Ibn Taymiyyah was raised in an Islamic environment renowned for piety and scholarship. He never bore witness to the evil practice of the mushrikeen in such a manner, nor did he contend with them growing up. Therefore, how could he possibly begin to comprehend the meaning intended by the pure Arabs at the dawn of revelation regarding the word ilah? Taken further, how could he grasp the essence of the Asnam, let alone even ever begin to fathom the nature of shirk among the Arabs? Regardless of how
his blunders about the shirk and so on, shirk al-Arab. Even shirk Arab says you can know much about shirk if you go to Azraqi and read the book of Azraqi, Tarikh Makkah and so on. But all his statements on show that he either did not read Azraqi or he did only part of Azraqi, because there's not only book. We have another book about Tarikh Makkah, and we have scattered things here and there in Sirah, in the Hadith, and so on. And you have to, if you want to have a more reasonable picture of what was going on there, you have to get all of them and try to put the mosaic together, so at least the general picture is reliable with certitude. The details may be different. You remember we discussed the issue of the story mentioned that Khalid was sent to Al-Uzza, and then he went there and cut the tree and so on, burned it down and came back. And allegedly the Prophet asked him, what did you see? He said this and this. He says, no, he did not do anything. That was still there. So he went back. And then ultimately a black woman with huge hair and so on came out and attacked him and he killed her. Then he reported to the Prophet, who said, even if the story is fabricated, the fabricator is familiar with the Arab myths about Al-Uzza, and he put it in the story. So even if it's fabricated, it tells us what the Arabs believed about Al-Uzza, and that every idol or every weapon of like these trees, when they are spun with the skeleton and so on, they become somehow an idol, but not an idol in human shape, but rather like a weapon. There's a fine distinction. Arabic you don't find in other languages, for example. And we extracted that with difficulty ourselves. But anyway, and that they hear voices, someone talked to them and so on. We said, what the Arab belief is that with every idol, there's a demonic entity or a satanic entity or something like that. And that's their belief. And maybe in reality, there may have been some hidden servant, because most of these idol manager or idol priests and pundits are fabricators and liars. We see that in India now with their own eyes. And they do this trickery to fool the common people. So maybe they're hiding in some cave, and she talks about like through a tube, terrifying everyone. The god is talking, or the goddess is talking to them, and things like that. But anyway, that's the belief of the Arabs. Even if the story is fabricated, it cannot be forgotten. It's nihilo and inventing the whole image out of nothing. There must be some that image in people's mind around that time. And I believe the story is most likely fabricated in that form. He went there, maybe destroyed the idol place and banned it, and that's it. and nothing came out, and no black woman, or no, terrifying, and so on. And the sadden, the pundit of the priest of that facility was running up the hill, saying, "Uzza, take revenge for yourself. I cannot help you today," and things like that. Most likely it's not true. It's fabricated. But even if fabricated, still indicate what the people believed about these things. And that's what was our concern there. Not that this event itself has happened like that. But we need to do some work in that. We need to do serious work. The chapter about Shirk al-Arab was very exhausting. I needed to go also to Babylonian and find the old Illat version, and how pagans import deities and give them an extra attribute befitting in their local environment. And we see that now with our own eyes in India. In the recent centuries, we have sufficient record of that, publications and so on, which show really how a deity is imported to another place and gets new attributes and things like that. Yeah. This is a well-established normal process, how mythology develops. The moment you enter in the domain of irrationality and mythology, you can develop further and further. But you cannot start ex nihilo, something as a core, and then it adds an accretion and accretion and accretion until you have something which you cannot even imagine that the minimal core inside was the origin really. But you have to work on that. So let's just try to really say it is unlikely that Ibn Taymiyyah intended to attack the Quran or attack and doubt that it's a revelation. Although some people pronounce on him takfir for this issue and some other issues related to divine attributes, but that's not our issue today. I think that's extreme. This is hostility. When people argue and they don't control their anger and so on, and keep rationality and responding according to the Quran, jadilhum billati ahsan, dispute with them in the most beautiful manner. The most beautiful manner, if someone comes with nonsense, you explain why it is nonsense in a cold and academic language. You don't go to the counter and start, no, you mean this and this, and you are a kafir and so on. That's not billati ahsan, it's billati aswa. And this will never settle in dispute. Only jadal billati ahsan settle disputes. Only jadal billati ahsan settle disputes. And unfortunately, that essentially because of partisanship, because of human tendency to be oppressive, to be dominant, to submit to their own arrogance and their own self-exoneration and self-righteousness, we have all these diseases. If they were humble, say, oh, this is maybe a truth, let me analyze it, that problem will be solved. But that's not the general human reaction to truth, which contradicts what they have, especially from childhood or from generation. They respond usually deviously right away. Majority, only few who are humble enough to say, if it's the truth, I have to accept it. But let me look at it, let me scrutinize it. That's the difference between the one who really want to save himself, want to reach the truth, want to find the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his place in the universe proper, with someone who just, no, what I have is all good enough. I don't want a headache. Leave me. I don't want to enter these things. That you will never get away with this attitude, unfortunately. Okay, so that's just try to not to go extreme and accuse Ibn Taymiyyah of being genuinely intended to be kafir. I don't think it's correct. I don't think that's the correct conclusion. But they are blinded. They developed certain ideas outside the Quran Sunnah initially, taking from fiqh books, from this and this, other things, instead of going to the original source, which should be the fundamental one, the base. They went to the branches, picked up some fruits, which may be partly rotten, collected them, and then they thought, how did the tree come from these fruits? No, the fruits came from the tree, and some of them were rotten. If you recognize that, you solve the problem right away. Especially if you over-admire some of your imams. Ibn Taymiyyah, being of a humble family at the time of Taqlid, majority of people are Muqallideen, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the great Imam Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, all of this excessive veneration, who said that he cannot commit major blunders. He committed so many blunders, is unbelievable. Yeah. But this extreme veneration, and thinking these are the guardian of Islam, if you go very much out of it, and you go out of taqlid, you are in danger of being, like, for example, once I have a dispute with, he's a good Egyptian. He's from Jama'ah Islamiyah, not from Jihad. The follower of Umar Abdul Rahman, allegedly. But they didn't comprehend Umar Abdul Rahman. Abdul Rahman is much bigger. Umar Abdul Rahman is much bigger and more sophisticated than them. Anyway, he was once talking and someone saying, listen, if you take the rukhas, the easement of all fuqaha, then all evil is in you with that. You take as Hamza saying is okay, this Medina school say that anal intercourse with your wife is okay, and this and this. If you take all these rukhas, all these easements, they call it rukhas, then all evidence you say, I don't know any faqih belonging to Islam says salah is not obligatory. So if I believe that salah is obligatory, is it all evil in me? So he was stuck. He's repeating this sentence. إذا أخذت رخص الفقهاء صح فيك الشر كله. Just a slogan which is internally contradictory, which is just rubbish. But he's taking that. That's what he educated in childhood, and he never reflected on that thoroughly. But that's عقلية المقلد. He never reflects on that thoroughly. That's it. It's not true. The amount of things agreed upon by all fuqaha, by all schools, and even narrated by tawatur, and even tawatur amali, like that dhuhr is for rak'ahs, unless you are traveling, and all these things, that's narrated by tawatur. It's ijma' based on tawatur. A kind of super reporting over tawatur. Everyone reported that, not only one after one, plenty, excluding the possibility of error. No, it's everyone reported that. Just from seeing the parents to pay for rak'ah. What's that? That says dhuhr. The parents say, Allah, we with him, thousands of us were praying for rak'ahs when we are not on travel. And the next generation knows that. They don't report it like we ask our parents or something. It's natural. That's what you see. So they reported by their doing, and the other generation by their doing. And nobody in people of Islam said ever that dhuhr, when you are not traveling, is not for rak'ahs. So plenty of that. Most fiqh and sharia issues, majority of them are really agreed upon by all fuqaha and by all schools. If you work thoroughly to count them, you will be surprised. The majority of ahkam. Some single ahkam here and there will be maybe various points of view, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For example, that prayer, a woman who is in praying age and she's in tahara, she cannot pray, her salah is not accepted if she doesn't have a khimar, head cover in salah. That's reported by visualization and by reports and so on. It's not only by tawatur, it's by ijma. But what else she has? This agreement with the wife of Salah. For example, Salama is more conservative. She has to have a jilbab on top of the inner clothing. So inner clothing and the jilbab and the khimar, three thoughts, 3 pieces. Maimuna said, no, it is enough to have an inner dress which may be tight, shows the body shapes and so on, but not transparent, obviously, because it's not covering the awra, but otherwise visible. And she was praying this way. And her feet are exposed. Salama wanted her feet to be covered on the top, at least during Salah. That's only Salama said that. And the other wives have another options. Umar said 3 thoughts. Another Sahabi said 3 thoughts. But khimar, ijma', based on tawatur. So it's super tawatur, what we call ijma' essentially. So it is not so that the easement, if you take all easements, obviously if you take it deliberately, trying to find a way everywhere without evidence, that's sign of a sickness of the heart. You want to escape from obligation, because your intention will be always, I take the point of view which I feel more comfortable, that is really connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if I don't have a certitude, then I'm with the probability of evidence. And maybe, like Rafa yesterday, someone asked about lifting the hands toward the ears and going from movement to movement. For ihram salat, entering salah, it's agreement. It's not narrated by tawatur. Nobody ever saw or narrated anything else. Everywhere else, there are various narration. But it doesn't matter. This is a secondary issue. So again, this is the same problem there, that he took with some fuqaha, especially his beloved of his family's faqih, because they're Hanbali from house, and they regard the major Hanbali faqih, but they have even shuruh, and they have his father and his grandfather. His grandfather have the collection, which have been explained in explanation of Shawkani, which is I will remember the name of the collection of hadith from the various books, which he regards as a good reference for the madhab and for fiqh generally. This Al-Majd, his grandfather. His father is less than the grandfather and less than Ibn Taymiyyah in fame, but he's also, like someone said, he's became like a star between the moon and the sun. Became invisible because of the moon and sun overshined him. But his father is also a scholar with some writings and things like that. So in this family, you grow as a madhab al-Hanbali is the most correct madhab and so on, and then you become slowly, without noticing it, you go to the level of idealizing Ahmad bin Hanbal and his school, and then the catastrophe happens there, because there are certain blunders there which is absolutely catastrophic for Ahmad bin Hanbal himself. And if you don't get rid of them, become critical, but it's very difficult when you are out of age and you are the mufti of Hanabila in Damascus. Imagine. It's very difficult to tell the people, listen, what I've grown up, so I tend to be wrong. He had the courage to do that in the issue, issue, not the Aqidah issue, and that's the reason he was prosecuted. And the divorce, the 3-time divorce in one session or in one. He said, no, that's not true. It is only one divorce. And his argument is stunning and comply with the Quran 100%. But because the problem of divorce, triple divorce, became rampant at his time, he was forced to change his point of view. And then everyone, all the madahib al-arba'a are against you, you are violating the madahib, you are doing this, you are undermining Islam. And he was in prison for that, not for the other rampant things. We were so frozen in taqlid that is, for them it was like shaking the world. Yeah, so I'm just trying to give the background so you know these people, where the problem came from. The problem came from excessive taqlid, being grown up in taqlid, and not forced by circumstances to break the taqlid and become independent. And then you stay slave in that. It's very difficult than these inherited school of thought and so on. That's the reason we have, even with some Shabab, difficulties about Hanafi and so on and so on. Most of it is nonsense. Most of it is really trivial. It's not worth even thinking about it. I was quite annoyed yesterday when I was asked about lifting the hand. Don't get busy with these trivialities. Choose a madhab. We know for Taqrib al-Ihsan, there's no doubt about that. He lifted his hands. Everyone agrees. Hanafi say he didn't lift the hand otherwise, only in that. And they were mocking anyone doing that. Like when the following joke. It's a joke. I don't think it's happened really. When Hanafi was commenting with a Shafi who did the Salah, at least he was praying behind him. There was a situation they don't even pray behind each other. It became so extreme. And he said, mocking him, كاد شيخنا أن يطير. Our Shaykh will almost have flown away, lifting his hand as wings. And he moved his head like that. And the Shaykh, the Shafi'i said, if you don't fly in the first one, you do that in the first one, I don't fly in the other ones. So it's become a joke and not a joke. It's nonsense. But there was an issue. Like, for example, people say, I cannot be certain about Iman. So I should not say I am mu'min with certainty, because there may be tazkiyat al-nafs. They have a good reason for that. So we should, I am mu'min, inshallah. Allah willing, I am a mu'min. I cannot be certain to do. I think this is not a bad way of expressing it. And then we have the following. Hanafi did not say that. So if you should pronounce shahada, you are at least formally a mu'min, and you should not take a istithna in that. Which I think is not a good word. It's not a point of view to be discussed in the first place. It's stupid to go in that area. But they went in that area. And then the following fatwa, asking a Hanafi, is it permissible to marry a Shafi'i woman which says, Ana mu'mina, inshallah, so make exception her iman? They said, yes, it's possible as a qiyas to, she is a little bit still better than the Jewish woman, the Christian woman. And she are allowed to buy a Jewish woman, a Christian woman who have bigger blunders. It's okay, you can buy this one. Imagine that. That's the question. It's a mockery. And as I mentioned, the Shabab, don't take what the Mashayikh and what you have brought up as a go dig the history, you'll find absolute jokes. Like the joke has always about women, this Maulana of India several centuries ago, when I think before even the Fatawa Alamgiriya or after, so was saying woman is al-awra. That is the statement of Ibn Mas'ud, which some people lifted as the hadith of the Prophet. And must be covered, awra must be covered. Definitely, okay. So the best cover for a woman is either the grave or a husband. And one student, Sheikh, what one of the better of the two? The Sheikh said, the grave. So, meaning essentially, reinstitute what? Just bury them live. That's the best way to settle this hour. Based on wrong statements by Mas'ud, which some people wrongly attribute to the Messenger of Allah. He never said that, and they can make an oath, 50 oaths that he never said that. Based on the studying of the Asanid and knowing the mindset and the way Ibn Mas'ud is thinking about women. he could not shake up completely the misogynistic attitude of his own tribe and his own people. He shook plenty of them, definitely, but he could not shake all of them. Traces are there. Who said that the Sahaba did not have trace here and there and there? Everyone has a trace from a certain direction, depending on his upbringing. That's the reason the point of view of a Sahabi is never an authority. Even their ijma' in that usual sense, which is usually silent ijma', is even not an authority. Because they may choose to remain silent to someone they are not confident 100%. Ibn Abbas said that clearly in a certain situation. He said, he objected to something, said that Umar was saying that, and in his time, you did not confront him with your point of view, which you claim being founded. That's really, that's special. I don't remember the story itself. The point of view is well founded in the Quran and Sunnah. He said, I was afraid that he would beat me up. So it's very well possible that Sahabi will not confront Umar with his point of view, being afraid that Umar will beat him up with his durra. Because it's not infallible. Simple. It's okay. Unless you make of Sahaba and Ibn Abbas an idol. Then you are in the way down to the abyss. So my advice to myself and everyone, get out of the mentality of taqleed, because we have, luckily, we in the final dhikr, we have the Quran protected letter by letter, completely, with the various readings and variants, and also the Arabic language related to the Quran at least, and generally is protected, even more than protection of the dhikr. And we have plenty of sunnah. Good amount can be analyzed and shown to be well established with certitude, like mutawatir and similar to mutawatir. Few hadith had turned out, we have checked now and reviewed it, because we shook about the taqleed and the believing that was in Bukhari must be sahih by necessity is not true. And we have examples already. The hadith of Abu Hurairah, we confused what he heard from Ka'b al-Ahbar and so on, like, were it not for Hawa, for Eve, no woman, no female would betray her husband. It's blatantly wrong. It's a catastrophic mistake. But the Jews say something like that because they think she's the one who betrayed Adam and advised him to eat from the tree, which is completely false. It's a fabrication. It's a lie against Allah and His messengers and His prophets. That's not true. The one who betrayed her mother is Adam. She followed him, so she's mistaken also. Instead of slapping him on the back, in his stupid backhead, don't do that. Allah prohibited that. They didn't do that. She didn't have the courage or the sufficient independence to do that. But that would have been her obligation. So she is also partly guilty, but she's the follower. She's never the leader. She never betrayed anything. If anyone betrayed, he betrayed her by pulling her in the swamp with him. That's one. So we can't, from the text of the hadith, it's impossible to be from the same source that will give us the Quran. It's impossible. So from where it is, did Abu Hurairah fabricated? No, it is confused in his mind between what he heard from Ka'b al-Ahbar and he thought he heard from something about Eve or something, and to confuse the two. What happened? This is one way of the memory weakness in certain aspects, which is called referencing. It's not. You may remember the episode exactly as it is, but in the context and in which situation it is, you don't remember. Like one video I saw, an analyst of the memory and its various types of pitfalls, he said he could swear 100 oaths that his sister in his graduation ceremony, she's a bit older than him, I think, was wearing green. And he was convinced absolutely. And then one time the topic came and his sister said, graduation coming, green? Who told you that? We have the picture. It was not green. Say, I swear it was green. You showed him the picture. The graduation ceremony was pictured, photos. That's before the time of deep fake and so on. So I said, I wore green in that other occasion, but you confuse the two occasions. That occasion, you remember the details exactly, but you got them reconnected in the wrong way. That's called isnad. So being excellent memory of episodes does not mean you refer them to the right source as it should be, or part of it putting in another context, without meaning that your memory is bad. Memory is still excellent, Abu Hurairah. It's still excellent. But the reference capability is not as strong. In that sense, we see from the hadith of Eve betraying her husband, and the hadith that were in those Bani Israel were stingy. They ordered not to save the meat and just give it to the poor, but they were too stingy. They kept it, made it smoked or exposed to the sun, so it became hard and so on. It can be saved for a long time. And then the hadith claims, allegedly, said, were not for Bani Israel, meat will not rot. And we know that's an impossibility because humans and animals, everything rots with time. If it's not treated properly with salt and mummification and things like that, it will rot. Well before Bani Israel existed, and Yaqub even was created and born. We know that by necessity from history, from even the Quran mentioning the previous revelation, we're saying our parents have rotted away and became dust and so on. Generation before even Ibrahim, Hud and so on and Noah. So it's a triviality. It's a pure triviality and physical triviality and geological triviality and paleontological triviality. And the hadith contradicts that clearly. Where is that? Most likely one of the myths of Israel, which Ka'b al-Ahbar innocently was reporting. And Abu Huraira could not separate it from his mind with some other. Also the hadith about the creation, 6 days and so on, which is from Abu Huraira also. Even Ibn Kathir said that must be from people of the book, but Abu Huraira got confused. Compare that to the one who knows the Bible of the book scripture and have his own collection of scripture and was teaching them in certain classes. That's Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As. If we check all his ahadith, it's completely clean. Nothing cross-referencing the people of the scripture. So he has better isnad power than Abu Hurairah, and possibly equal or better memory because he was also writing, supported with the writing. So we have to get out of this mentality. The idol of Bukhari, the idol of Muslim. There's no idolization. You have to get to that stage. In time past, it did feel something and was motivated most like by political forces who love that what Bukhari and Muslim have concerning obedience to a ruler and things like that. And they don't like the other hadith mutawatir about accounting the ruler and fighting them if necessary or the thing that was buried. Although these other ones are mutawatir. While the hadith obedience only 3, 4 maybe. And the high question about 2 of them at least. High question about it. Hadith of Salama and the hadith of Ka'b bin Malik, I think. Yeah. The one of Kufr al-Buah is better, but in the other wording in Tabarani is better than the wording in Bukhari, even in that, you see. So we have to get out of this. I took a long sermon, but just a good comment. I think we conclude today. What's the time now? Rush?
Time is nearly 10 o'clock. I just got a very 2 short paragraphs, then we finish this chapter.
We finished that, and I think it's enough for today. But
no problem, sir.
Listen to this general thing. That's where the catastrophe started. Not because the mistake of a specific point, but because the mistaken attitude towards what scholarly achievement have been over the centuries and idolizing that. And in modern time, we've had many people talking in various videos and so on about classical Islam, classical. There's nothing called classical Islam. Islam is in full in Quran and Sunnah. And if you restrict even to Sunnah mutawatir and Ijma', that's enough. Ijma', which is super tawatur actually, not Ijma' meaning opinion colluding or something. There's nothing opinion. It is really narration, but narration of action like that. I saw the next generation of Sahaba, all of them saw their parents and the previous Sahaba praying Dhuhr when they are not traveling, or Fajr. This is a take Fajr, 2 rakats, universally. Nothing else have been seen, nothing have been narrated. They don't say, I saw the Sahaba, all of them praying 2 rak'ahs in Fajr. No need to say. It's just mentioned casually. And become the overwhelming opinion based on narration and seeing things from the parents and grandparents. Is it the reporting of Amal in a comprehensive way, even more than Tawatur? That's the best definition of Ijma' really, which makes sense. It is a super Tawatur essentially. If you take that alone with Sunnah, that's more than enough. Secondary issues can be then settled and analyzed, like the issue of this meat not rotting and Eve being a betrayer. We can discuss that and show clearly that's false and someone committed an error in his memory or something like that. But Islam is that what have been narrated by Tawatur and so on from the Sunnah, and we usually corroborate with the Quran, like the major battles, like Ahzab, all these things. The essential details are there. They just find details. Most of them are not relevant for fiqh. Most of them. But if it is relevant, it will be also Tawatur. So if we take that and Quran, that enshrined Islam as it in pure form, not classical or not classical, as an abstract entity called Islam. Now, how much of that we comprehend? Some people comprehend more, some people less, some people are closer, some are farther. There's nothing called classical Islam. That's maybe valid for Christianity when they get a council, like Nicaea, and what they enact, they spread the myth that the Holy Spirit was there and guided everything, and it's infallible. With that way, you get what they call classic or orthodox. It's not in Islam. Orthodox Islam exists, but it's abstract in Quran and Sunnah. How much we get genuine Islam, according to our capability, according to which imams and the mujtahideen we are following and so on, we get more or less. Hopefully we get 70-80%. That's barakah. And we should be always humble, say, maybe I didn't get it right at this point. Let me review it again and analyze it further. Then we can progress. We can get Islam out of the dark age again in leading the civilization of the world, because we have in these two books, the Quran itself as a letter by letter, and decoded even in writing, essentially, not even a reading, in writing. That's the fundamental one, as I stressed in the beginning of Tafsir Halaqat. And Sunnah, some of it is available as written documents, most of it actually, but that's what narrated by Tawatur, what we say, a more precise word, what can be established with certitude. That's from the Messenger of Allah. All of that comprehensively give Islam as an abstract entity, and Islam as an abstract entity is enshrined in that. No more, no less. That's it here, there. Now, how much we can deduce and get from there, that's an issue of ijtihad, of using the mind, and so on. And especially since the Quran deliberately, by Allah's revelation, say clearly that we have revealed ayahs who are mutashabihat, with the various interpretation. Why? So that these brains see the gray material works. Because this is a revelation, none will come after that end of time. And you have to go to that original river and get pure water from it. And then plant and continue. And then you notice, there's some problem, then let me go get pure water. The moment you think you don't need to go to the pure water, you are finished. You are done. You are going to the abyss. That's exactly what happened when they started taqleed and regard taqleed. Everything is done already. Why should we go back? Nobody should do ijtihad. Khalas, all ijtihad is done. That's Ibn Salah doing in the 5th or 6th century. Ushering, and everyone accepting that and going to sleep. And then decline started and soon accelerated until even the whole state, the whole society collapsed. And the Muslim countries were invaded, and Muslims have been contaminated with kufr and shirk and secularism and so on. And they are not trying to get out of that. So that's the way to go. There's no other way. Think about it, analyze and think about it. Not the way to go to taqleed and define something called Orthodox Islam, like the Orthodox theory that the Quran was collected only by Uthman and so on. It's not. Even the narration, Bukhari say that it was collected, the master Quran was collected at Abu Bakr time. The famous story of that. But actually, we have found enough narration so on, and they're collecting that in one place, which shows that it was already collected. At least 14, 15 readers have their own copies of the Quran, and there was a master copy in the Masjid of Medina, and people were praying near to that column will have that. And that one was given to Uthman ibn Abbas Thaqafi. So the collection is done as the Quran itself says. It's not your business. We will do it. And he did it through the agency of the Prophet and 10, 15 readers who have their own copy, being updated continuously. We have the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr al-As. So we have that. Nothing called Orthodox, not Orthodox, or conference or some scholar said, khalas, all ijtihad is done and so on. This is all nonsense. Should be forsaken. The moment you hear that, you should reject it right away. Instead of defending, I know some of us defend taqleed, otherwise people may get something non-Islamic in Islam. No, they will not get something Islamic by ijtihad and so on. They may make a mistake. But also your scholars, they have made mistakes. For example, one of the famous mistakes of Madhab al-Hanafi is that implicitly they believe that the previous Sharia is not totally and completely abrogated. And that's the result that we have this issue with shellfish. That's actually a Hebrew and Israelite issue. And they thought this is still persisting. Yeah, they thought it's persisting because there's nothing in our Sharia abrogating it. So it's still persisting, which is a blunder, because that this final revelation abrogated all previous Sharia is by necessity of reason. No haram is haram still, no wajib. We have to have new laws from zero. Even if it looks exactly the same like the other one, it is still from zero, because that one was abrogated, even for a few seconds, and the new one was enacted. Dictated by necessity of reason. See the section about abrogation. Based on that, they have the issue with shellfish. So the stoker have to jump right and lift and squeeze right and say, okay, for people in Bangladesh, because they are in the rivers and the Gulf of Bengal and so on, and they live substantively from shellfish and other. Okay, it's makruh, but okay, it's permissible for them because of the necessity. No need for this nonsense. Just go to the usul and clean them. Clean the mess. Dump it in the rubbish. Very, very full stop. But obviously, scholars of India and Pakistan, majority of them are muqallid anyway. Below level of ijtihad and philosophical capacity, except a few like Shah Ayatollah Dahlawi and all these. Okay. There are only few people we will can be described as, in a sense, mujtahid or close to ijtihad. That is the justice, regurgitating things for hundreds of years. The holy book is not the Quran, the Fatawa Alamgiriya. We have to check that out. We have to progress. Where is toward Quran, not outside Quran. Because you have the infallible source there, protected, but on the shelves. Take it from the shelf and start working with it. So that's where the disease comes. Not a disease that Muhammad made this blunder and so on. That blunder became a reasonable point of view. You have discussed it. He made a mistake there, but it is wrong ijtihad. I said, no, some of them are real blunder. Which I said, this is an error, must be rejected with all staunchness, without compromise. Because that's dictated to reject that, dictated by Quran and Sunnah when they are comprehendly referenced, especially in the fundamental issues. Then we can see what's going on there. Yeah. Otherwise, we'll be going all ever in circles without achieving anything. Now, finish these two sections or paragraphs so we can close that chapter and continue next week, inshallah.
No problem.
Allah
Regardless of how a scholar or diligent researcher has a certain degree of leeway in crafting terminology as per strict scholarly principles, they cannot violate the nature of language itself, be that by usurping it, desecrating its integrity, or substituting it haphazardly. Particularly acute in this respect is the Arabic language itself, since it is the domain of the protected zikr, the final revelation sent to mankind. Irrespective of how we approach the definition of al-uluhiyya, it cannot under any circumstances be devoid of the following critical components. Firstly, that it relates to the matter of intrinsic agency, which is characterized by absolute independence of will and free choice, exercised in complete autonomy. Notable among its specific aspects is the matter of creatorship, underpinned by absolute independence and sovereignty. Secondly, as set out previously, it is the matter of derivation, that is, the notion that a divine being is belonging to a particular divine genus or species. Without this, it would be tantamount to a nullification of the verse, which relates to the mutual hindrance. It would distort words from their proper correct context, placing one at odds with the specific wording that Allah has chosen for the final revelation. Clearly, that inevitably leads to kufr. May Allah protect us from such evil errors. Final chapter. Moreover, there is also
a small note. That's the uluhiyya, the genuine original meaning. But there's the secondary uluhiyya, which is in idols and so on. But we mentioned that. Like, for example, Maryam being an ilah, but by calling mother of God, because she has the ilah in her belly for a certain time. So she contained the ilah sometimes, then get having the attribution of uluhiyya in that sense. That is secondary. It is not neither of the divine essence, nor she is of absolute creative power. Nobody said that from a Christian. So if a Christian object, no, we don't believe she's ilah. No, it's ilah in the secondary sense. The same idols are ilah in the secondary sense. The same Isa is an ilah. Isa, the human Isa, is an ilah in the secondary sense, because this is a full human, and the divine being was inserted in his body somehow, or merged with his body, or turned into flesh and body, and that's in that sense. But the Christ, the supernatural entity, that's one of the divine triunion, which does not exist. It's just an imagination. But that's another. So this is secondary, but the secondary is mentioned as a footnote, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Final chapter. Moreover, there is also another conclusive argument, which we find in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. However, the truth is that the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam with his people contains far more knowledge and wisdom than just reaffirming the definition of al-uluhiyya, divinity, or further clarifying the nature of the asnam, or even elucidating the reality of shirk, as has already been demonstrated by the multitude of textual evidences from the Quran, which have already been presented thus far. Foremost among them is a verse which relates to the matter of tamanu, mutual hindrance, which by itself should more than suffice. The study relating to Ibrahim alayhi salam and his people will appear in the next section, part 7 of this present book. Okay, so that concludes the text. So for next week, it will be chapter 6, page 49.
Or is it a meeting, or we have Tawheed the next year? Yeah, I don't know. You know,
we'll have halakha, and then we can have if people want it, to be honest with you, because often people are quite apathetic. So at the end of the day, until people start to move, there's less merit. Okay, so just before we go, somebody asked the question in the comments. I don't tend to take the YouTube comments because this isn't the Q&A time. What do you think of the claim of some Deobandi scholars that Allah can lie? Does you agree with the statement that it's kufr?
No,
so Ahmed Raza Khan said that himself, that it's kufr. But yeah.
No, this is a mistaken identity with them. They think because the divine power extends to everything, but lying for a necessarily existing being who is the haqq in himself, the absolute haqq, contradict the necessarily existing. So power does not extend. Like the same thing. Can Allah annihilate himself? Can he commit suicide? No, it's impossible. That he ever wills that is also impossible because he knows his attribute and he knows that that's eternity and he is necessarily existing, and it will never come, if we allow to use the word, in his mind that he won't want to die, or because this is not possible. So the power will not extend to that. That's excluded by necessary existence, by the nature of Allah being al-haq. That's it, excluded. So he cannot. And this is not a deficiency in Allah's power. No, it's not a deficiency in Allah's power. The same, for example, when some Deobandi say, for example, or Ash'ari say that Allah can burden a soul more than its limitation. This is within the divine power. Thinking that is a possibility, which power, even divine power, can extend to. But it's not a possibility, because this would, if he burdened without a reason, without punishing people or something like that. But that's another issue. But initially, in his injunction, putting an injunction for you, for example, I make an injunction that you should fly, but you have no capacity to fly, no wings, and I punish you. That's what essentially they mean, better than what they can. This means Allah is ordering you something you know it is impossible for you, and contradicting him being the existing, whose knowledge is comprehensive, and what he knows is true. What he doesn't know does not exist. You see, that's it. Like in the Quran says, do you teach Allah what he doesn't know in heaven and universe? You claim there's a deity. I say there's none. It can't be possible that there's deity which I don't know about them. Allah must know whatever or it really exists. So that's impossible. You can phrase that the following, that this would be injustice. Obviously, this would be injustice, that you punish for that. Yeah. Without punishment, it would be irrational. Why order someone to fly when you know with certitude that he cannot? See, I order you to do what you cannot do because I made you not able to do. This is internal. He's contradicting himself. And this is above being Allah being the perfect truth, the necessary being, with all aspects of his being are in his being, not conditioned by anything else. Is the eternal, the one from beginning to end, truth continuous, no falsehood, no deficiency can enter him in any respect. He is solid, is solid, no gaps there. Everything is, if you take the model I said, I think in Kitab At Tawheed and so on, existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and unity, is that to take the material example of a hollow tube and a solid rod, and the hollow rod which is like a tube. Clearly the solid rod is stronger, cannot be broken easily. So having a gap instead make you weaker. But it's the contradiction is existing. So in this case, cannot have a gap if you look at that space-time. It's just an example to have a visualization that can have no deficiency and gap in it. Otherwise, it's not as existing. It's impossible. So, but someone could phrase it using the phrase mentioned by Allah, Ya ibadi inni haramtu dhulma ala nafsi wa ja'altahu bainakum muharram. I prohibit myself of doing something like that. Either you say he decided in eternity, during all his existence, that he would not do dhulm, account you for something you did not do, or something he made you unable to do, what this will be like a burden more than its limit, then he prohibited himself. Either say he prohibited himself so he will never do it for all eternities, or say by necessity existing his own. Whatever language you use, in the case of lying, you cannot use the language prohibited. I never said Allah is telling the truth. He never said I prohibit myself of lying. But in the case of dhulm, you may find that it is still accessible to the power, but Allah prohibited himself because his divine perfection dictates that he must prohibit himself. So you look at from the right side, it is the divine necessity, or from the other side, he prohibited himself because of divine perfection. How do you look at it? Choose one. Maybe the use in the Quran that I prohibit myself from injustice and made it injustice between you is just metaphorical in the sense it is so bad that if it would have been accessible for me, I would have prohibited myself, but it's impossible for me anyway. And I made it for you haram for you because you can't do it. You're very well able because you are deficient, you are created, you are finite. It's very able to do that. But it's not within the ability. Either you formulated as I prohibited myself, or you formulated it's impossible for me to be like that. Yeah. The same like the formation, my is impossible. It is not befitting for his divine majesty, the necessary existing to have an offspring. It's impossible. There's no way you have an offspring in any way possible. So he had formulated the case of dhulm, and I prohibited myself from injustice. It may indicate that it would have been possible, but he prevented himself of that and decided that the decision is final and absolute until all eternity. That's a way you could express it, which you make for the addressee, for the humans, give them more encouragement. I prohibit myself from that, although it would have been accessible for me, which is not true, but as if then else in that sense. But I make it prohibited for you. And giving himself as an example encourages more to comply. You see my point? But in reality, it is impossible for him to initiate. And there's no deficiency in power. That's exactly the perfection in power. Because power which extends to the impossible, meaning simply he is a contradictory. He could erase his own existence, but that's contradictory, this is existing. So we have contradiction. That's one of the atheists use it. Can he create a stone which is infinitely heavy so he cannot himself lift it? That's not creatable. An infinitely heavy stone is simply not creatable. It's just a linguistic expression referring to absolutely nothing, to an impossibility. An infinitely heavy stone can't exist and not creatable. It's an impossibility. It sounds like a reasonable sentence, but I mentioned very simple sentence, which at face it looks like possible, but then if you explain further, it's an impossibility. Yeah, but it needs to be worried about this issue of linguistic illusion, that you may be deceived by the language ability to refer to things that are impossible and give them a name as if they are an entity. They are non-entity. They can never exist. They're impossible to exist.
Like you give the example of square circle. I
gave the simplest example of the square circle. Such an entity cannot exist. It's an impossibility. It's an internal contradiction. But I still can use the word square circle and even have a sentence. This square circle is marvelous. Oh, nice sentence. Nothing. Referring to nothing or nothing. It's a nonsensicality. But it appeases the human feeling of nice poetry. Many of poetry express things which are internally contradictory. That's the imagination and the imagination of human being, because we are finite. So the imagination can cross the boundary of what's really imaginable and existence. Not for the divine. I don't want to go in these deep philosophical issues more than necessary because they tend to be confused someone, but independent of that, the Quran says everywhere that nobody is more truthful than Allah, because He is the truth Himself. He is the necessary existence, upon which all non-necessary, all reality, or imagination, our mind, all of this goes back to Him.
So this thing about, would it be a statement of kufr or just how would you answer to say that Allah can lie? It's possible that He can lie.
It is itself a statement of kufr, but it has to be extended to the people because they are confused. They think this is within the power. It's with the power of the contingent, not the infinite power of the necessary existing. They made a mistake there. That's it. It's a mistake. But if he reminded of that, then he has to abstain from that and show the evidence for that. That's create contradiction. The best way is to use power for that, Because one of the Christian arguments for Trinity is Allah is capable of doing anything. He can split himself in three, for example. Okay. This means he can cease to be existing. And then the whole reason collapses, the whole argument, the whole issue of divinity goes away. And then we end in a magic, in a non-rational magic world. If that's so, then it's okay. He can be 3 and he can be 1 and he can be -1. It doesn't make any sense. All of these statements are nonsensical. That
paganism starts to works then.
Yeah.
You can
That's
converge with this, that.
So recognizing that this is not a limitation of divine power is really asserting that divine being the one belonging probably to an existing being. That it doesn't create any contradiction. Otherwise, the whole rationality, the whole meaning of statistics, the whole meaning of divinity will lose its meaning. There's no meaning for anything anymore. It's a magic world. Then. It's a magic world in which nothing is rationally connected.
Okay, inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay, so same again next week, inshallah, and Tawheed back on Sundays.
The same. They have a much worse statement. Some of them, some Braille we say, not everybody now. Braille we say that the Messenger of Allah can enact Sharia, and even if he can make an error mistaken, Allah rectify that, but approving his error and making then Sharia. It's a statement of kufr. Because Allah cannot make any Sharia. He received Sharia and he broadcast expressed it in an infallible way. That's the only way to deal with this matter. Anything else will undermine again the definition of divinity and the definition of Bishop. But because they go extreme with the Prophet and make him Nur, and sometimes they discuss is it eternal or not eternal. The moment they show eternal Nur, they are out of the fold of Islam. That is clear. That's exactly what the Christians say about Isa. He's an eternal God from God, eternal light from light, etc. That's exactly what gets you off the limit of Islam into kufr. All statements of Ariusian and before that, subordination, that is subordinate to the Father, and there was a time he did not exist, he was a created being, even a big one who does the whole universe in behalf of his Father, still is not getting you to the clear shirk out of the fold of monotheism. The moment you say he's eternal, of divine essence, then you are out. The same here with the blurry statement that he may make a mistake, but his mistake will be reversed into right by divine action. That's it. Just absurdity. Just analyze it, write it with the pen, will say, assume this, then you see this will create, make Allah contradictory internally. And since not as I said, he may be then a messenger of some kind of a demon, not of the divine being. There's no way. Yeah. You will find such things sneaking here and there. And they insist the Prophet is Nur because the Quran says Nur was but it's a created Nur. Simple. If we agree on that, that's it. And that most likely is the metaphorical sense. It's not the Nur which we see with the lamps and so on. Electromagnetic fields definitely is not of that. It's more of particle type. But even particle type, and said even the quantum mechanics is confusing us. We don't know it is light or material or so on, and they are related, and they're all actually fields and all of that. But this does not make sense.
So retarded, though. I mean,
fundamentally, it's created. That's the point. Is it a field or it's a particle or it's a wave? And the quantum mechanics, that's all science.
It's like, what a retarded belief system. You've got the Prophet, he's born of a human being. He's hanging around. He's eating.
They will do the following then. It is actually born from some kind of a nur coming from his father, and his father from his father going to Adam. For Adam, it is coming from Allah. That's it, essentially. So you have no descending like that. It's just absurdity. It's just absurdity. That's what so-called Ismaili Imam claim about there, and these called Muwahhideen, these Druze. What is that? Is that somehow Al-Hakim Amrillah was divine. Even Al-Hakim himself was mocking the founder of the Rus. If you study the history as thorough as you can. Definitely not within the fold of Islam. There's no way they can be within the fold of Islam. Because of this. Not because of other things. Other things are secondary. That's the fundamental one. That somehow there's a divinity in some sense, whatever confusing it is, and these imams, and they go back emanating from the original supreme being. Then we are out. That's definitely contradicting Islam. Definitely. So, but this is really, some of it is clearly out of the order. Some of it is blunder. Some of it is going to Islam. The same. And the Prophet warned us in the hadith, famous hadith of Umar, in which we discussed in Saqifa, when he started, did not attack the problem. He was addressing mainly this issue of Saqifa and Bay'ah and so on. And he started with Rajm and then undermined the theory, shows clearly that Rajm is Masukh. He did not recognize that. He did not see the fifth point of that. And then he said, and I remind you that Mr. said, do not overpraise me. أطروني طرع طرع. The same way the Christian overpraised Isa ibn Maryam. What is their overpraise? He clarified. فإنما أنا عبد, I'm exclusively a slave, not a lord. When Sarah gave him the title of lord, they say, no, we cannot call him slave. That's under his rank. This undermining his glory and rank. Although they believe he is a created being, but that's the beginning of the catastrophe. إنما أنا عبد فقولوا عبد الله ورسوله. Say whatever after that, but straight first is abd, create. That's it, finished. Then we are out of the realm of catastrophe. Because he's no, okay, maybe no electromagnetic radiation, gamma ray, doesn't matter, created or not, is abd, it's created. خلاص, finish, game over. Say whatever you say, bring your evidence. Maybe it has reasonable in the revelation, maybe it's a metaphorical expression. That's all secondary, no great importance. The only point, abd or rab, in the genuine fundamental sense. He's not rab. He may be a master, he may be like these things, but in a case, matter of generation. But he's a master, but he's still abd. That's the fundamental point. Is he abd or a divine being? He's not divine being. The moment you come close to the divinity, you are coming close to the kufr and shirk. And the moment you assert any type of divinity, which dictated by necessity of reason, like eternity, like being born instead of being created, and the Nicene Constantinople, the Creed says clearly, born but not made. They say it's created but not made, but not created, born. And then that's what is this this being born, what does it mean? And they go in a never-ending cycle of contradiction and so on. But this he is not made. The problem is not made. That's the problem. The same here. Don't say he's abd, he's made, he's created, not necessarily existing or not branching from or born or splitting or something like that, emanating, whatever is not a creative act. Then the moment we step that, we are out of monotheism into shirk, and we are out of Islam into kufr, certainly. That's the meaning of it. That's the border. The border is very sharp.
Okay, inshallah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Call it in today.
So that's it.
Okay. And we'll do inshallah. Okay. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah. Next week, same thing.
Yeah. Any question, anything to just to wrap up? I think we discussed many things. So
Yeah. Let's call it quits.
Preempting that, yeah. This halaqah is rich in some aspects of these issues of necessary existing. What is the border between divinity and non-divinity? Sharp border. Is that what I say? Created, not created. And that's Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Allahu samad. That's the one who has no gaps and no hollowness in it. Appealing to the word of samad, meaning appealing essentially to the people. Talk about a stick which is hollow and stick is non-hollow. The one who has hollowness is not samad. Samad is a solid one, the one without gaps and hollowness. In the case of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, is absolutely samad, absolutely no gap. The way if we represent that with something we can visualize with the mind and with the eyes, if any possible, is like a mathematical one. There's no way you can split it or have any gap in it. That's absolute smallest things possible and compact things you can imagine. This is obviously just an imagination, just an example. We give that as an example. Allahu Samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. Neither he is begotten. He's existing. He's eternal. He's the beginning of everything. Behind him, before him, there is nothing. The hadith says, كان الله ولم يكن شيء قبله أو معه أو بعده. All of them are true, but قبله is the correct wording. because other hadith say, أنت الأول فليس قبلك شيء. He's the beginning. So what's behind that? Before that, there's no before. There's an impossibility. You imagine there's something before because imagination can run over the board because you have a finite imagination. You are not necessarily existing being with knowledge. There's nothing before. It's an impossibility. It's very difficult to visualize. But that's in the hadith second. Can Allah existed and nothing was with him or at him or before him. Because the before does not exist. It's just referencing something before as if it's an entity. Again, this is a linguistic deception. But there's no entity called before. The absolute beginning. There's no entity. The absolute beginning is the absolute beginning. You can imagine it, you can work with it, you can find mathematical models like the domain of the logarithm, which is impossible, cannot be possibly extended to the negative axis. The negative axis is just missing from the domain of the logarithm. It's defined only for positives. And in the limit going to zero from the right side, it goes to infinity and so on, but it may be still defined in some sense. But the other one does not exist. It's not that it is there and it's impossible to define in any way. That can be verified mathematically. The domain of the definition of the any logarithm function, let's take the natural logarithm. It represents the others essentially. They differ by a factor. Negative numbers, which exist as number, as abstract entity, are impossible to be in the definition domain of it. There's no way, it's impossible. It's internally contradictory. That's a model. That bugs you, and if you make a drawing, you don't know how to make a drawing, it doesn't matter because you are finite. It's not obvious for you immediately. For the divine being, it's clear. And if we allow us to say that Allah laughs and so on, which some hadith has come, he will be laughing at us when we're thinking about that because, it's impossible for us to access. We have to take it by dictated by necessity of the mathematical and metaphysical proof. That's it. The same, for example, when we talk about temperature in absolute terms. Going to absolute zero is a process which never ends. You never reach absolute zero so what is absolute zero and behind absolute? There's nothing below absolute zero. It doesn't exist. It's just an imagination running over its border because the imagination of a limited being and cannot consider itself by limitation. Only when you sit and do the mathematics correctly, you say, it doesn't exist. There's nothing called negative temperature. In absolute terms, there are obviously in solid, there are states which can be described by equation as if it's a negative temperature, but this is actually not negative temperature in that sense. It just can be described equation-wise as if it's a negative. But it's a complex state of solid bodies with electrons in certain way, certain states are filled and unfilled and so on. It's a complex entity which can be described using thermodynamic equation as if the temperature is negative. But that's only a mathematical description for another situation, not what we think about the universe and temperature, for example, in the space between the stars. It's approaching absolute zero, but it's never absolute zero. Otherwise, we nothingness can't exist. Even if we address it and make words for it. Yeah. Or even make a mathematical reference on certain occasion using the same equations, which look like similar, but it refer to something else.